This video will help you sleep and relax. But before we begin, I would like to know which city you're from and what time you're watching this. Now, subscribe to the channel, relax, and let's begin. I grew up on the res in Montana. We lived in a small community about 20 miles from the nearest town, and our traditions were still strong when I was growing up. My parents were pretty traditional, not medicine people or anything, but they respected the old ways and taught us kids to do the same. There were two strict rules in our house that we never broke. Don't look outside after dark, and don't be outside after dark unless absolutely necessary. My mom would always pull the curtains closed as soon as the sun started setting, and they stayed that way until morning. If we had to go out after dark for any reason, we went straight to where we needed to go, eyes down, and came straight back. Most kids in our community followed these rules without question. I never really thought much about why. It was just what we did, like not touching a hot stove or looking both ways before crossing the street. It was safety. But my older brother Marcus was always more rebellious than me. When he was 17, he started sneaking out to meet this girl named Layla from the next housing cluster over. He'd wait until our parents were asleep, slide his window open — we lived in a one-story house — and slip out. He'd be back before sunrise, and our parents never caught on. This went on for months until one night in October. I remember because it was unusually cold that year, and we'd already had our first frost. I was 15 at the time and knew about Marcus sneaking out. I didn't tell on him because, well, he was my brother, and he'd promised to take me fishing that weekend. That night, I woke up around 3 a.m. to use the bathroom. As I was heading back to my room, I heard something at Marcus's window. I figured he was just getting back, so I peeked through his doorway to give him crap about it later. What I saw still makes my skin crawl. Marcus was halfway through his window, frozen still. Our family dog, Shep, was standing in the yard maybe 10 feet away, his hackles raised, growling low in his throat. But he wasn't looking at Marcus. He was looking up, above the window. "Shep, come here, boy," Marcus whispered. "Come on, Shep." The dog didn't move, didn't even acknowledge Marcus, just kept staring up and growling. I watched as Marcus finally pulled himself all the way through the window. He turned around to look at whatever Shep was seeing. I couldn't see his face, but I saw his whole body go rigid. He stood there for what felt like forever, then suddenly dove through the window, slammed it shut, and yanked the curtains closed. I ducked back so he wouldn't see me, but I heard him run down the hall to our parents' room. I crept after him and listened at their door. "Mom, there's something on the roof," he was saying, his voice shaking. Something was watching me. I heard it, like someone was sitting right on the edge of the roof. My mom's voice was dead serious when she answered. "What did I tell you about being outside after dark? What did I tell you about looking up? I know, I'm sorry, but—" "No, you listen to me. You keep that window locked. You don't go out there again. You don't look outside, not ever." I'd never heard my mom sound so scared. I slipped back to my room before they caught me eavesdropping, but I couldn't sleep the rest of the night. I kept thinking I heard something walking above my ceiling, soft, deliberate steps. The next morning, nobody mentioned what happened. My dad went to work at the tribal office like normal. My mom was quiet, but acted like everything was fine. Marcus looked like hell, with dark circles under his eyes, but he didn't say anything about the night before. But word got around. I don't know if Marcus told someone at school or if Layla had her own encounter, but suddenly people in our community were talking about the thing that walks among us at night on the roofs of houses. Everyone seemed to have a story: an uncle who heard footsteps, a cousin who saw something hunched at the edge of their roof. My mom's sister, my Auntie Lisa, came over for coffee about a week after Marcus's incident. I was pretending to do homework at the kitchen table, but I was really listening to them talk in low voices. "It followed me," Auntie Lisa said. "Last night, I was up late sewing, and I heard it on the roof. Every time I moved to another room, it moved too, right above me, like it knew exactly where I was standing." My mom just nodded, like this was completely normal. "Did you look up?" "Of course not. I'm not stupid." "Good, don't. And don't go outside until the sun's fully up." I wanted to ask them what it was, but something in their expressions stopped me. They looked resigned, like they were discussing an unpleasant but inevitable fact of life, like death or taxes or winter coming. For years after that, I followed the rules religiously. I never looked outside after dark. I never went out if I could help it. And when I did, I kept my eyes firmly on the ground, never looking up toward the roofline. But when I hit my 20s, I moved into my own place, still on the res, but a different housing area. It was a small one-bedroom with a flat roof, and I felt grown up and independent. I still followed the rules out of habit, but I didn't think about them much. Until it started happening to me. It was always the same. I'd wake up around 5 a.m. during winter months, when it was still pitch dark outside. At first, I'd just hear heavy footsteps on my roof, deliberate slow steps, like someone wearing boots walking back and forth. I'd lie in bed, heart pounding, waiting for it to stop. But it got worse. Sometimes it would run, and I don't mean like a person jogging. I mean full-on sprinting, like a grown man in steel-toe boots charging across my roof. Sometimes I'd hear what sounded like chains dragging. Once I swear I heard what sounded like claws scraping across the shingles. I was dealing with this almost weekly, and it was always the same pattern. The walking would start at one end of the house, right above my bedroom. Then it would make its way slowly across to the other end, then back, like it was pacing, waiting. I tried everything. I called a few friends over to spend the night, thinking maybe I was just being paranoid and hearing the wind or tree branches, but no one ever wanted to stay until morning. They'd always find some excuse to leave before dark. The ones I grew up with knew better than to be out after sunset. Finally, I went to my grandfather. He was in his 80s by then, and had been a spiritual leader in our community for decades. I figured if anyone knew what this thing was, he would. He listened to my story without interrupting, just nodding occasionally. When I finished, he got up and went to a cabinet, pulling out a small vial of water. "Holy water," he said, handing it to me. "Put it on your ceiling, every corner of every room. It won't keep it away forever, but it'll give you some peace for a while." "But what is it?" I asked. He shook his head. "Something that's been here longer than us, something that doesn't like us being here. Just remember the rules. Don't look at it, don't acknowledge it, and it should leave you alone." I did what he said. I went home and dabbed holy water in every corner of my ceiling. That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept through till morning without hearing a single footstep. But like he warned, it didn't last. After about 3 days, the walking started again. I'd reapply the holy water, and it would stay away for another few days. It became a routine. I wasn't the only one dealing with this. My neighbor Rick told me he was sitting in his living room one night when he heard someone walking on his roof. He said he felt paralyzed with fear. Literally couldn't move a muscle until it stopped about an hour later. He was a big guy, a construction worker, not the type to scare easily. But when he told me this story, his hands were shaking. Another neighbor, an older woman named Karen, was taking out her garbage one night when she heard walking above her doorway. She said she dropped the trash bag and ran inside so fast she sprained her ankle. She refused to go outside after 4 p.m. for months afterward. The most terrifying experience I had was last winter. I'd been doing the holy water routine for months, and it had been working pretty well. But one night, I forgot. I was exhausted from work, fell into bed, and was out like a light. I woke up to the sound of running. Not the usual pacing, but frantic running back and forth, right above my bed. It was so loud I thought the ceiling might cave in. Then it stopped, right above where I was lying. The silence was worse than the noise. I lay there, hardly breathing, knowing it was standing directly above me. Then I heard a sound I'd never heard before, a soft scratching like someone or something was trying to dig through my roof. Scratch, scratch, scratch. It went on for what felt like hours. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, just lay there, eyes squeezed shut, praying for sunrise. When my alarm went off at 7, the scratching had stopped. I got up and looked at my ceiling. There were no marks, no holes, nothing to indicate anything had been trying to get in. But I know what I heard. I asked around, trying to find out more about these things. Most elders don't like talking about it, but I pieced together what I could. They've been here since before colonization, living alongside us. But they don't like us. They watch us, follow us, try to scare us. Some people say they can take human form sometimes. Others say they're more like spirits or demons. Whatever they are, they're real, and they're still here. So if you're reading this, take some advice from someone who's lived with these things my whole life. Don't look outside after dark. Don't be outside after dark if you can help it. And never, ever look up if you hear something on your roof. If you start hearing unexplained noises in your attic, it might not be in your attic at all. It might be on your roof. And if that's the case, one of these things has already made your home its territory. Find a priest or a medicine man. Get some holy water. But most importantly, don't acknowledge it. Don't look for it. Don't talk to it. Because from what I've seen, the only thing keeping these things on the roof and not in our homes is our refusal to invite them in. I still hear it sometimes, especially in winter, walking, waiting. I don't know what it wants. I don't want to know. I just follow the rules and pray it stays outside where it belongs. Us. I've spent most of my life feeling more at home in the forest than anywhere with 4 walls. Growing up in foster care, I never really felt like I belonged anywhere. My biological parents were Native American, but I never knew them or much about my heritage since I bounced between homes until I was 12. That's when I landed with Margie, a tough but fair woman who lived on the outskirts of town, right where civilization meets wilderness. She never tried to keep me inside when I'd disappear for hours into the trees. She knew that's where I felt comfortable. "Just be back for dinner," she'd say, and I always was. I learned the woods, how they breathed, how they spoke. I could feel changes in the air that meant storms or danger, could identify every sound from the snap of a twig to the distant call of an animal. The forest became my real home. After I moved out at 19, I wasn't sure what to do with myself. I worked odd jobs for a while but felt suffocated in town. One day I met this old-timer named Clark who was selling off his trapping gear. Something clicked. This could be my way back to the woods, but making a living from it. I scraped together what money I had, bought his equipment, got my hunting and trapping licenses, and set myself up. For the past 3 years, I've made a decent living selling pelts and meat. Nothing fancy, but enough to rent a small place in town that I only use a couple days a week. The rest of the time, I'm where I belong, under the trees, listening to the wind, reading the ground for tracks. I know it sounds weird to most people, but it's how I'm wired. Last weekend is when everything went wrong. I headed to a public hunting cabin about 20 miles north of town, deeper into the mountains than my usual spots. It's technically a shelter for hikers and hunters, though not many people use it this time of year. When I arrived Friday afternoon, I noticed a single backpack sitting on one of the bunks. Not unusual. People leave stuff behind, or sometimes hikers stash gear they'll pick up later. I settled in, unpacked my supplies, and started preparing my dinner. The cabin has big windows facing the tree line, and while I was chopping some jerky to add to my stew, I caught movement at the edge of the woods. Not unusual in itself, could be deer or anything, but what made me pause was that it looked like a human figure, just standing there, partially hidden by a tree. I squinted to get a better look, but within seconds, whoever it was faded deeper into the darkening forest. I shrugged it off. Probably another hunter scouting the area. I finished making my food, ate, and decided to set some snares before it got completely dark. I grabbed my gear, knife and flashlight, and headed out along the main trail. I planned to set up in a small clearing about a half-mile away where I'd had luck before. As I was working on my third snare, I heard footsteps on the trail. I crouched down instinctively and waited. A man walked by, moving at a steady pace. Something felt off immediately. He had no pack, no gear, just regular clothes, which made no sense this far out. The temperature drops hard at night, and he didn't even have a jacket. Plus, he was moving too methodically, almost like he was patrolling. I decided to follow him, thinking maybe he was the owner of the backpack. Maybe he was lost or confused. It happens sometimes when people underestimate these woods. I thought I'd catch up to him, give him a bit of a scare for being so unprepared, then point him back toward the lodge if that's where he was headed. I followed his footsteps, keeping a good distance behind him. He went over a small hill, and when I crested it, he was gone. The trail stretched out empty in front of me. I stood there confused, scanning the trees on both sides. There weren't any obvious places he could have turned off. The underbrush was thick here. That's when I heard it. A shriek ripped through the air, not an animal sound, not quite human either. It was like someone trying to mimic a mountain lion, but with a human voice box. It echoed through the trees and then cut off abruptly. What followed was worse. Complete silence. No birds, no insects, nothing. Anyone who spends time in the woods knows that sudden silence is the most dangerous sign there is. Every instinct in my body screamed danger. I turned and ran back toward the cabin, not bothering to be quiet. The silence followed me, pressing in from all sides. When I broke through the tree line and saw the cabin, I nearly collapsed with relief, until I saw him, the same man, standing exactly where I'd seen the figure earlier, at the edge of the forest on the other side of the clearing, just standing there, watching the cabin. I slowed my pace, not wanting to show fear. As I approached the cabin, he didn't move, didn't acknowledge me, but I swear his head was tilted at an angle that didn't look right. I got inside, locked the door, and loaded the shotgun I'd brought for hunting. I considered confronting him but decided against it. Something felt deeply wrong. I checked all the windows, made sure everything was locked, and eventually tried to sleep, though I kept the shotgun close. I must have finally dozed off, because I woke suddenly to a sharp banging on the window near my bunk. I grabbed the shotgun and looked toward the sound. The man was there, face pressed against the glass, illuminated by the dim glow of my dying fire. What I saw doesn't make any physical sense, but I know what I saw. His jaw was Wrong. Distended, hanging lower than a human jaw should be able to. His eyes were too wide, too fixed. Open window, he said. No inflection, no emotion. Just those words repeated. Open window, open window. I raised the shotgun. Back the fuck off or I'll shoot, I shouted. His jaw dropped even further, impossibly far, and from his throat came that same piercing shriek I'd heard in the woods. It was so loud the window vibrated. Then he was gone. Not running away, not moving back. Just gone, like someone had switched off a projection. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. When dawn finally broke, I cautiously went outside. There were footprints in the soft earth outside the window, human-shaped but oddly long in the toe. They led back to the forest. I examined the window and found deep scratches in the glass, like something had been trying to claw its way in. That was enough for me. I packed my gear quickly, grabbing the mysterious backpack too. I wasn't about to check my snares. They could stay there. As I hurried down the trail toward my truck, I kept scanning the trees, feeling watched from every angle. About halfway to the parking area, I saw him again. He was crouched behind a fallen tree, watching me, but made no move to follow or approach. I picked up my pace, nearly running the last quarter mile to my truck. As I drove away down the dirt access road, I saw the figure one more time, standing alongside the road. But he looked different this time. His arms hung down, almost to his knees. His face seemed more sunken, less human. I drove straight to the sheriff's office in town. The deputy at the desk looked concerned when I burst in, probably because I was pale and wild-eyed, still covered in 2 days' worth of dirt from the woods. He called the sheriff, who took me into his office. After I told him what happened, leaving out the most impossible details, he showed me a file on his desk. A hiking group had been attacked 3 days earlier in the same general area. 1 dead, 1 missing, 1 injured, but survived. They'd been searching the area but found nothing. Then he showed me a photo of the missing hiker. My blood went cold. It was him, the man I'd seen in the woods. Same face, same build. But the man I'd seen couldn't possibly be this hiker. The man I saw was something else. The sheriff asked me about the backpack. I handed it over, and they identified it as belonging to the missing hiker. They thanked me for the information and said they'd send a team back out to search the area. That was 5 days ago. I'm writing this from my apartment in town, where I've been hiding ever since. I haven't gone back to the woods. I can't, because every night since then, I've seen that figure outside my window. Each night it looks less human. Its arms are longer now. Its jaw hangs looser. Sometimes it speaks, but not in its own voice anymore. It uses voices I recognize, Margie's, Clark's, even the sheriff's, to try to convince me to open the window. Last night it pressed its face against the glass, and I could see that its skin didn't fit right anymore, like it was wearing the hiker's face as a mask that was slowly slipping off. I come from Native American heritage that I never learned about, but I've heard stories. I think I know what this is. The old stories call it a skinwalker. It takes the form of its victims, but it can't hold the shape perfectly. And now it's followed me from the forest. I don't know what to do. I can't tell anyone this. They'd think I'm crazy. The sheriff already gave me a strange look when I tried to explain more yesterday. I've tried sage, salt lines, prayers I found online that are supposedly from my people. Nothing works. It's getting dark now. Soon it will be at my window again. I hear a tapping starting already. I don't know how much longer I can stay awake. I don't know what happens if I fall asleep and it somehow gets in. I don't know what it wants from me. But I know one thing. That thing in the woods wasn't the missing hiker. It was wearing him, and now it wants to wear me. The tapping is getting louder now. I think I hear my name being called in Margie's voice. I've been debating whether to share this experience for years. I'm 32 now, but I was 8, almost 9, when it happened. Even after all this time, my skin still crawls thinking about it. I've told my therapist, who said childhood fevers can cause hallucinations, but what my grandfather told me years later makes me certain it wasn't just delirium. Winter 1999. I had come down with strep throat that quickly developed into scarlet fever. My temperature was hovering around 103 degrees Celsius, and I felt absolutely miserable. My body ached everywhere, my throat was on fire, and I had this awful rash that itched like crazy but hurt when I scratched it. My parents both worked full-time back then. Dad worked night shifts at the factory, so he needed to sleep during the day. Mom was a third-grade teacher who couldn't take more time off after already staying home with me for 2 days. The antibiotics had kicked in enough that I wasn't contagious anymore, but I was still too sick to be left alone. The solution was to send me to my grandmother's house about 15 minutes away. She lived alone in this small 2-bedroom ranch house on the edge of town, right where the neighborhood started giving way to farmland and woods. She had this little terrier mix named Samson, who was the sweetest dog, never left her side and came running the second she called him. I remember Dad dropping me off that morning. He looked exhausted after his shift, with dark circles under his eyes. He carried my backpack with my medications and some books while my grandmother fussed over me, touching my forehead and clicking her tongue at how warm I felt. "Don't worry about a thing," she told my dad. "I'll keep the little one comfortable. You go get some sleep." Dad left, and Grandma settled me into her bed because it was more comfortable than the twin bed in the spare room. She tucked me in with an extra blanket, even though I was burning up, and put Samson on the bed beside me. "He'll keep you company while I make some chicken soup," she said. I must have fallen asleep pretty quickly. The medicine made me drowsy, and the fever drained all my energy. I remember drifting in and out, aware of Samson curled up against my leg, his warmth oddly comforting despite my fever. I'm not sure how long I slept, but when I woke up, the light coming through the curtains had changed. That golden afternoon light was streaming in. My throat felt like I'd swallowed glass, and my pajamas were damp with sweat. Samson was still on the bed with me, but something was off about him. He was sitting up, completely rigid, staring at the bedroom door, which was cracked open about 6 inches. That's when I heard my grandmother's voice from the living room. "Samson, Samson, come here, boy." Her voice sounded normal, that slightly raspy, warm tone she always had. Samson's ears perked up, but he didn't move. He just kept staring at that crack in the door. "Samson, come on, boy," she called again, a little more insistent this time. I found it weird that Samson wasn't responding. This dog would practically trip over himself running whenever my grandmother called him. But now he was frozen, his eyes fixed on the door, his little body tense. She called again, "Samson, Samson." Each time she called, Samson would twitch slightly, but wouldn't move from his spot. I remember feeling annoyed. My head was pounding and her increasingly loud calls weren't helping. "Grandma," I croaked, my voice barely working through my sore throat. "Samson's in here with me." There was no response from the living room, just another call for the dog. "Samson, come here, boy. Samson." I was getting frustrated. The medicine was making me groggy. My fever was making me irritable, and I couldn't understand why she kept calling for a dog that was clearly with me. So despite feeling like absolute garbage, I pushed myself up to sitting position. "I'll go tell her you're here," I mumbled to Samson, sliding my feet to the floor. That's when Samson did something I'll never forget. He whined this high-pitched, anxious sound and grabbed the sleeve of my pajamas between his teeth. Not hard enough to hurt, but firmly, like he was trying to keep me from leaving the bed. I gently pulled my arm away. "It's okay, boy. I'm just going to tell Grandma you're in here." As I shuffled to the door, I glanced back and saw Samson hadn't moved an inch. He was still staring at the door, but now he was trembling. The hallway was dim compared to the bedroom. Our house had always been bright and open, but Grandma's place had this perpetual dimness to it that I never liked, especially in the narrow hallway leading to the living room. The floorboards creaked under my feet as I made my way down the short corridor, one hand trailing along the wall for balance because the fever was making me dizzy. "Grandma," I called out weakly, "Samson's with me. He's been in the bedroom the whole time." I reached the end of the hallway and stepped into the living room. The TV was on, some afternoon game show with the volume low. On the coffee table was a mug of tea next to a half-eaten sandwich on a plate, but my grandmother wasn't there. "Grandma," I called again, confused. Her voice came again, but I couldn't pinpoint where from. "Samson, come here right now." The living room opened into a small dining area and kitchen. I checked there. Nothing except a pot of what smelled like chicken soup simmering on the stove. The back door was closed and locked. My grandmother's house wasn't big. Besides the living room, kitchen, and 2 bedrooms, there was just 1 bathroom and a small laundry room. I checked the bathroom, empty. The spare bedroom, empty. The laundry room, empty. By this point, my heart was starting to beat faster. The fever was making everything feel slightly unreal, but I was clear-headed enough to know something wasn't right. Where was she? Her car was in the driveway. I'd checked every room. The house was locked up. Standing in the middle of the living room, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with my fever. "Grandma?" I called out, louder this time, my voice cracking from both fear and my sore throat. That's when I heard it. My name, spoken in my grandmother's voice, but somehow different, a little too hollow, a little too deliberate. "My name," it called, and then something that made my blood run cold. A deeper voice, definitely not my grandmother's, saying, "Come to the front door." I froze. The front door was about 15 feet away from where I stood. From my position, I could see it was still locked, the deadbolt in place, the chain secured. "My name," came my grandmother's voice again, this time from right outside the front door. "Come, let me in. I forgot my key." Every instinct in my body screamed that something was terribly wrong. My grandmother had been inside just minutes ago. How could she be outside now? And that other voice. Instead of going to the door, I backed up, slowly at first, then turned and ran as fast as my sick body would allow back to the bedroom. Samson was where I'd left him, still staring at the door, still trembling. I slammed the door shut and turned the lock, thankful that even the bedroom doors in my grandmother's old house had locks. With shaking hands, I reached for the phone on my grandmother's nightstand and dialed home. "Please be awake. Please be awake," I silently begged as it rang. My dad answered on the 4th ring, his voice thick with sleep. "Hello?" "Dad," I whispered, afraid whatever was outside might hear me. "Something's wrong at Grandma's. I can't find her, but something's calling my name and telling me to come to the front door." There was a pause, then rustling sounds as Dad presumably sat up in bed. "What do you mean you can't find her?" His voice was instantly alert. "She's not in the house. I looked everywhere, but I keep hearing her voice calling for Samson, and then it called my name. But there was another voice too, a deep one, and I was talking too fast, my words tumbling over each other. Stay in the room. Lock the door. I'm coming right now. The urgency in his voice terrified me even more. Please hurry, I begged. I'm already putting my shoes on. Stay on the phone with me. I heard him moving around, the jingle of his keys, the slam of a door. While he drove, he kept asking me questions. Was I sure I'd checked everywhere? Was the back door locked? Did I see anyone outside through the windows? All the while the voice continued, sometimes calling for Samson, sometimes calling my name, sometimes mixing in that deeper voice saying things like, "Open the door" or "Come outside." It wasn't constant. There would be stretches of silence that almost made me think it was gone, only for it to start again just as I began to relax. Samson stayed on the bed with me, no longer frozen, but now pacing in tight circles, occasionally growling at the door. It felt like hours, but was probably only about 20 minutes before I heard my dad's car pull into the driveway. I ran to the bedroom window and peeked through the curtains to make sure it was really him. The sight of him rushing from his car to the front door in his pajama pants and hastily pulled-on coat made me sob with relief. I heard him unlocking the front door, calling my name, his voice immediately distinguishable from whatever had been mimicking my grandmother. "In Grandma's room," I yelled, unlocking the bedroom door and running down the hallway. Dad met me halfway, kneeling down and grabbing my shoulders, checking me over. "Are you okay? What happened? Where's your grandmother?" "I don't know," I cried. "She was here, and then she wasn't, and something was calling for Samson and for me." Dad's face went pale. He stood up, keeping one hand on my shoulder. "Stay behind me," he said firmly. We checked the entire house again. Nothing had changed. The TV was still on. The soup was still simmering. The tea had grown cold, but no grandmother. Dad even checked under the beds and in the closets. He was just about to call the police when we heard a car pull up. Through the front window, we saw my grandmother getting out of her neighbor Mrs. Peterson's station wagon, waving goodbye and walking toward the house with a small grocery bag. Dad yanked open the front door. "Mom, where have you been?" My grandmother looked startled. "Robert, what are you doing here? Is everything all right?" "No, everything is not all right. I've been out of my mind with worry. Where were you?" She frowned, confused by his anger. "I was at Ruth's house next door. I ran out of saltines, and I wanted some for the soup. I was only gone for 20 minutes at most." She looked past him at me, standing in the doorway. "I thought you were sleeping, sweetheart. I checked on you before I left, and you were sound asleep with Samson." Dad was shaking. "You left an 8-year-old with a high fever alone in the house." "Only for a few minutes. The neighbor's is just across the yard. I made sure the doors were locked." "What's this all about?" Dad pulled me closer. Someone was here, or something. It was calling for the dog and for them, telling them to come to the door. My grandmother's face changed. The confusion melted away, replaced by something I couldn't read at the time, but now recognize as fear mixed with recognition. "Inside," she said quietly. "Both of you, inside, right now." Once inside, with all the doors checked and locked, my grandmother made Dad and me sit at the kitchen table while she made fresh tea with hands that weren't quite steady. She didn't ask me to explain what I'd heard. Instead, she acted like nothing unusual had happened, insisting it was just the fever making me confused. Dad wanted to take me home, but my grandmother convinced him I was better off resting at her house, where someone could watch me constantly. "I won't leave again," she promised. "Not even for a minute." That night I slept in my grandmother's bed again, but this time she was with me, and Samson was positioned at the foot of the bed like a sentry. I didn't hear the voice again, but I hardly slept, jumping at every creak and groan of the old house. The next day, Mom picked me up after school, and no one talked about what had happened. When I tried to bring it up with my grandmother on later visits, she would change the subject or tell me it was just a fever dream. It wasn't until I was 16 that I finally got some answers. I was helping my grandfather, my mother's father, not related to the grandmother in this story, clean out his shed during a summer visit. We were sorting through old hunting gear when I worked up the courage to tell him about that day. Instead of dismissing me, he got very quiet, setting down the fishing rod he'd been examining. "Your grandmother ever tell you about that?" he finally asked. "No," I said. "She always says I imagined it." He nodded slowly. "Yeah, she would. Doesn't like to talk about those things." He looked at me with serious eyes. "But you didn't imagine it." My skin prickled. "You believe me?" "Had the same thing happen to me once," he said. "Years ago, when your mother was just a baby. Woke up in the middle of the night, heard what sounded like your grandmother calling from outside. But she was right there in bed beside me." I stared at him, my mouth dry. "What was it?" He shrugged, but his expression was grim. "Don't know. Don't want to know. But I'll tell you what my father told me. If it says come to the door, you stay away from the door. If it says come here, you just stay still in the room until it quits calling." "Does it hurt people?" I asked. "Don't know that either, and don't care to find out." He picked up the fishing rod again, clearly wanting to end the conversation. But before he did, he added one more thing. "Smart of that dog to stay put. Animals know better than we do sometimes." That was all he would say about it. But it was enough to confirm what I'd always suspected. Something had been in or around my grandmother's house that day. Something that could sound like her, but wasn't her. Something that wanted me to open the door. I still don't know what it was. I've researched similar experiences online and found stories about creatures that can mimic human voices. Skinwalkers, wendigos, and other things from folklore. I don't know if I believe in any of those specifically, but I do know what I heard. Sometimes I still dream about it. In my dreams, I always open the door, but I always wake up before I see what's on the other side. Maybe that's a mercy. All I know for certain is that if I ever hear a loved one calling for me from an unexpected place, asking me to come to them when something doesn't feel right, I'll remember my grandfather's advice, and I'll stay exactly where I am. I've never shared this story publicly before. For 40-plus years, I've kept quiet about what happened during my time teaching on the Navajo reservation near Kaibeto. I was young then, just 24, fresh out of college in Massachusetts with an education degree and what I thought was an admirable desire to make a difference. God, I was naive. This was 1976. I'd taken a position at a small school on the reservation, eager to experience life in the Southwest. Growing up in suburban Boston hadn't prepared me for the vast emptiness of northern Arizona. The landscape was beautiful but alien to me. Red sandstone mesas rising from scrubby desert, endless blue skies, and stars at night like I'd never seen before. The people were reserved at first. Looking back, I understand why. White teachers came and went constantly, rarely staying more than a year or two. Why invest in relationships with someone who was just passing through? Still, I tried. I rented a small house near the school and attempted to involve myself in community events when appropriate. About 3 months into my stay, I developed a fascination with a particular mesa about 5 miles from town. From my classroom window, I could see it, standing apart from the others, almost perfectly flat on top. Something about it called to me. I started asking about it during lunch breaks in the teacher's lounge. Mrs. Begay, who taught third grade and had been kind to me since my arrival, got quiet when I mentioned it. "That place doesn't welcome outsiders," she said finally. "Not people don't go there or it's dangerous, but that the place itself didn't welcome outsiders." Her phrasing struck me as odd. I didn't let it go, though. I asked Mr. Tsosi, the maintenance man who sometimes joined us for coffee, if he knew anything about the mesa. "There are things we don't speak of," he told me. Not unkindly, but firmly enough that I should have taken the hint. "Some places are meant to stay empty." Mrs. Begay nodded in agreement. "Please, Mr. Anderson, there are many beautiful places to explore around here. That one, it's not for you." But their warnings only intensified my curiosity. I interpreted their reluctance as superstition, the kind of local folklore that makes places seem mysterious. I'd always considered myself a rational person. I didn't believe in ghosts or monsters. I thought I was being respectful by learning about the landscape and culture around me. That weekend, I packed a small tent, sleeping bag, some food, and plenty of water. I told no one where I was going, though I'd mentioned my interest in camping to other teachers. The hike took longer than expected, nearly 3 hours over increasingly rough terrain. No trail led to this mesa, which should have been my second warning. I reached the base by early afternoon and found a path up one side where erosion had created a natural ramp of sorts. The climb was steep but manageable. When I reached the top, I was sweating through my shirt despite the October chill. The mesa top was larger than it appeared from a distance, maybe half a mile across, scattered with pinyon pines and juniper bushes. The view was spectacular. I could see for miles in every direction, the land spreading out in bands of red, orange, and brown, with shadows of distant mesas stretching across the desert as the sun lowered. I set up camp near the eastern edge, where I'd have a view of the sunrise. I built a fire pit with stones and gathered wood for later. As evening approached, I felt a deep satisfaction. This was why I'd come west, to experience this solitude, this connection to the natural world that felt impossible back east. I lit my campfire as darkness fell, probably larger than necessary. The flames leapt high, casting my shadow against the rocks behind me. The stars emerged, thousands of them, the Milky Way a bright smear across the blackness. The silence was profound, broken only by the crackling of my fire and the occasional distant cry of a coyote. Around 10 p.m. I noticed a strange red light in the distance to the north. At first, I thought it might be another campfire, but it was too bright, too concentrated. It blinked irregularly, not like an aircraft warning light or anything man-made I recognized. I watched it, curious rather than concerned, for maybe 15 minutes. Then it moved. Not gradually, but in rapid bursts, disappearing from one spot and reappearing closer, as if teleporting across the landscape. My heart rate quickened. The light was approaching my mesa at impossible speed, covering what had to be miles in seconds. I stood up, suddenly aware of how exposed I was. My fire, which had seemed so comforting, now felt like a beacon announcing my presence to whatever was out there. But I couldn't bring myself to extinguish it. The thought of facing the darkness without its light terrified me more. The red light reached the base of my mesa and disappeared from view. I held my breath, straining to hear over the blood pounding in my ears. For several long minutes, nothing happened. I began to wonder if I'd imagined the whole thing, if the isolation was affecting my perception. Then I heard it, a scraping sound from below the cliff edge, like claws on stone, followed by grunting, snorting, animal sounds, but not quite right. Too deliberate, too rhythmic, like something mimicking an animal without fully understanding how they should sound. I froze, unable to move, unable to call out. The sounds grew closer, moving up the cliff face. Whatever it was climbing toward me. I should have run. I should have grabbed my flashlight and backpack and fled across the mesa top, found another way down the opposite side. But terror rooted me to the spot, my limbs leaden, my throat constricted. Then a hand appeared over the edge of the cliff, human but not human. The fingers were too long, the knuckles swollen and misshapen. Then another hand, then a head. It pulled itself up and over the edge with unnatural ease, as if gravity barely affected it. In the firelight, I could make out what appeared to be an old man. He was rail-thin, his ribs visible through taut, leathery skin. He wore what looked like a coyote pelt draped over his shoulders, the animal's head serving as a hood. His face was deeply lined, ancient beyond telling, with hollowed cheeks and eyes that reflected the firelight like an animal's. For a moment, he crouched there on all fours, making those not quite animal sounds, grunts and snorts that seemed to form patterns, almost like speech, but in no language I recognized. Then he stood, uncurling to a height that seemed impossible for his thin frame. He had to be nearly 7 feet tall. He wore only a breechcloth below the coyote skin, his limbs skeletal but corded with sinew. And he stared at me, through me, with eyes that held no human emotion I could recognize. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't even blink as we regarded each other across my campfire. His face betrayed no intent, no anger, no curiosity, just an ancient, patient awareness that made me feel less like a person and more like prey. He sniffed the air, his nostrils flaring. Then, without warning, he turned and went back the way he came, disappearing over the cliff edge. The movement was so sudden I gasped, sucking in air I hadn't realized I was holding. I stood shaking for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, straining to hear if he was still there, just below the edge. But there was nothing, just the crackling of my fire and the wind. The spell of terror broken, I sprang into action. I kicked dirt over my fire until it was extinguished, plunging the mesa top into darkness. I didn't bother with my tent or most of my gear, just grabbed my backpack, stuffed my sleeping bag inside, and took off across the mesa top, using only the starlight to guide me. I found another way down, a dangerous scramble that left my hands bloody and my knees bruised. I half ran, half stumbled the 5 miles back to town in the dark, constantly looking over my shoulder, imagining those inhuman eyes watching me from every shadow. I reached my house as dawn was breaking. I locked every door and window, drew all the curtains, and sat with my back against the wall until full daylight. At school on Monday, I must have looked like hell. Mrs. Begay took one look at me and led me to the teacher's lounge during our prep period. "You went to the Mesa," she said, not a question. I nodded, hands shaking as I clutched my coffee mug. "What did you see?" Her voice was gentle but insistent. I described the thing, the man, as best I could, the coyote skin, the unnatural height, the eyes that reflected light like an animal's. She closed her eyes briefly. "I told you that mesa doesn't welcome outsiders." "What was it?" I whispered. She hesitated. "We don't speak of them directly. It's dangerous. But what you saw, he saw you too. Will it come for me?" She touched my hand briefly. "You left that place. That was wise. But be careful now. Stay with others. Don't go out alone at night for a while." That afternoon, I requested a transfer to another school. The administration seemed unsurprised. They processed my paperwork quickly, and within 2 weeks, I was teaching at a different school 50 miles away. I thought distance would help. It didn't. Sleep became my enemy. Every night I dreamed of those eyes watching me from the darkness. I'd wake gasping, convinced there was something crouched outside my window waiting. I lost weight. My teaching suffered. The locals at my new school seemed to know somehow. An elderly man who worked as a crossing guard pulled me aside one day. "You've seen one of them," he said without preamble. "It's in your eyes now. The fear." "What can I do?" I asked. "Live," he said simply. "But know they have long memories, and they're patient." I stayed in Arizona until the end of the school year, then returned east, telling myself the nightmares would stop once I was home. They didn't. For years, I'd wake in the night, certain those eyes were watching me through my bedroom window, even on the 10th floor of a Boston apartment building. I tried therapy. The therapist suggested PTSD from an animal encounter, perhaps a mountain lion or bear that my mind had transformed into something more sinister. I almost believed her, wanted to believe her. But sometimes, even now, I wake to a scratching sound at my window, and sometimes, in crowds, I catch a glimpse of someone too tall, too thin, moving with that unnatural grace. I never see their face. They're gone when I turn to look directly. But I know, the thing from the mesa, the skinwalker, though I didn't learn that term until years later, didn't need to chase me or attack me. Its power was in being seen, in being known, in planting a fear that never fully leaves. I read in a local paper that they found Mr. Tsosi dead last year, a suicide according to the brief article. It mentioned he'd been a maintenance worker at the school where I first taught. I wonder sometimes if he had his own encounter, his own eyes watching him from the darkness. I'm not well. Haven't been for decades. The doctors call it paranoid schizophrenia now, but their medications don't help, because it's not in my mind. It's out there, waiting, patient as the desert itself. If you're reading this and thinking of exploring places where locals warn you not to go, places that don't welcome outsiders, please listen to them. Some boundaries exist for reasons beyond our understanding. Remember, they have eyes everywhere. They will take notice, and once they see you, they never really look away. I still can't sleep with the windows open. Even after 40 years, I wake up in cold sweats when the corn stalks rustle outside my apartment. Most people think I'm just being paranoid when I check and double-check the locks, or when I refuse to go anywhere near a cornfield. If they knew what happened that summer of 1984, they wouldn't judge me so harshly. I was 12 years old when everything happened. We lived on this small farm in western Nebraska, nothing fancy, just a modest 2-story farmhouse with peeling white paint, a barn that always needed repairs, and about 40 acres of cornfield. My dad took over the farm from my grandfather, who got it from his father before him. The Brinkwood farm, they called it. Small by Nebraska standards, but Dad always said it was the most productive farm in the county. People would marvel at our corn yields, how we managed to grow so much on so little land, especially when larger farms around us sometimes struggled. Every afternoon, like clockwork, Dad would perform what Mom called his rituals. I thought they were just superstitious farmer stuff at first. Every farming family has their quirks, right? Some pray for rain, some plant by the phases of the moon. My father hammered 10 wooden pylons into the ground around our house, 4-foot stakes with these weird symbols carved into them. They looked ancient, like something you'd see in a museum about Vikings or something. He'd placed them in very specific spots, measuring the distance between each one meticulously. If one was even slightly off, he'd pull it out and reset it, sometimes spending over an hour getting them perfectly placed. Then there were the scarecrows. Most farms had one, maybe 2. We had 4, and Dad positioned them in a diamond pattern around the perimeter of our cornfield. They weren't the friendly, stuffed shirt kind you see in children's books. These were made with real burlap sacks for heads, with crude facial features stitched with thick black thread. Their bodies were made from old wooden crosses, draped with tattered clothes that Dad never allowed Mom to replace, even when they were practically falling apart. He'd walk out to check on them every day, whispering to them as he adjusted their positions or tightened their bindings. The strictest rule in our house was that I had to be inside before sundown, when Dad had finished setting up his protections, as he called them. No exceptions. Even if I was just in the yard, even in summer when sunset came late, I had to be inside when darkness fell. I never questioned it much as a younger kid. It was just another house rule, like taking off your muddy boots before coming inside. That particular day in July started like any other summer day. I spent the morning helping Dad with chores, then had the afternoon to myself while he went about his daily ritual. I was kicking around my football in the yard, practicing penalty kicks against the side of the barn. I'd gotten a Manchester United ball for my birthday that year and was obsessed with soccer, even though most of my friends were into baseball. I lost track of time. The sun was setting, painting the sky this deep orange-red that made the cornfield look like it was on fire. I knew I should head in, but I was trying to beat my record of consecutive hits on this one specific knothole in the barnwood. Just a few more kicks, I thought. Dad's voice cut through the evening air. "Timothy, get inside now." He was standing on the porch, holding the screen door open. His face was tight with anger, but there was something else there too. Something I'd rarely seen on my father's face. Urgency. "Just 5 more minutes," I called back, not looking at him as I lined up another kick. "Now, Timothy." His voice rose to almost a shout. Maybe it was teenage rebellion starting early, or maybe I was just sick of rules I didn't understand, but I ignored him. I took another kick, hitting the knothole perfectly. "Did you see that?" I turned to him, grinning, expecting him to at least acknowledge my skill. But Dad was already striding across the yard toward me, his work boots kicking up dust. Before I could react, he grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my skin. "When I tell you to come inside, you come inside." He clipped me hard over the ear with his open palm, not enough to really hurt, but enough to shock me. Dad rarely raised a hand to me. "What's the big deal?" I protested, pulling away from him. "It's still light out." He dragged me toward the house, my feet stumbling to keep up with his long strides. "The big deal is you do as you're told in this house," he growled. "No supper for you tonight. Straight to your room." Mom tried to intervene when we got inside. "Frank, he's just playing." "He knows the rules, Martha," Dad snapped, pushing me toward the stairs. "Sunset means inside. No exceptions." I stomped up to my room, slamming the door behind me, furious and humiliated. Through my window, I could see the last rays of sunlight disappearing behind the cornfield. The scarecrows were dark silhouettes against the dimming sky, looking like they were watching our house. It was only when my anger started to fade that I realized I'd left my prized Manchester United ball in the yard. Dad would probably leave it out there all night to teach me a lesson, and with rain in the forecast, it would be ruined by morning. I couldn't let that happen. I waited until I heard Mom and Dad go to bed around 10:30. Their bedroom was on the first floor, at the back of the house, so they wouldn't hear me if I was quiet. I crept down the stairs, careful to step over the third step that always creaked, and slipped out the front door. The night was moonless and unusually still. No breeze, no cricket sounds, just this heavy silence that seemed to press against my ears. The yard was dark except for the dim yellow glow from the porch light. I spotted my ball near the barn and hurried across the yard to grab it. That's when I heard it, a strange rustling from the cornfield. Not like wind moving through the stalks, but deliberate, like something large pushing its way through. I froze, ball in hand, staring into the darkness between the rows of corn. The rustling grew louder, accompanied by a new sound, a low, muffled noise that raised the hair on my arms. It sounded almost like a human voice, but distorted, as if someone was trying to scream through a gag. Against every instinct telling me to run back to the house, I moved closer to the edge of the field, curiosity overpowering my fear. I could see movement in the center of the field where the corn stalks were swaying against the still night air. I pushed aside the first row of corn stalks, peering into the darkness. What I saw will haunt me until the day I die. The 4 scarecrows had moved from their positions around the perimeter. They were now in the center of the field, arranged in a tight circle. But they weren't just standing there. They were moving. Not like humans move, but in jerky, unnatural motions, their burlap heads tilting at impossible angles, their stick-thin arms bending and stretching as they seemed to be wrestling with something on the ground between them. Whatever was between them was thrashing, making those muffled screaming sounds I'd heard. I couldn't see it clearly, just glimpses of pale skin in the darkness, a hand reaching up only to be pushed down again by one of the scarecrows. I must have made a noise, a gasp or a whimper, because suddenly the scarecrows stopped moving. As one, their burlap heads turned toward me, though they had no eyes to see with, just those crude, stitched features that now seemed to be grinning in the darkness. One of them took a step toward me, its whole body moving in this horrible, jerky way, like a broken marionette. The corn rustled as it moved, getting closer, its stitched mouth seeming to widen into a grin. I was frozen in place, my feet refusing to move even as my mind screamed at me to run. The football slipped from my numb fingers. Suddenly, strong hands grabbed me from behind, yanking me backward. I screamed, thinking another scarecrow had gotten me, but it was my father. He pulled me roughly away from the field, practically carrying me as he ran back to the house. "Don't look back," he hissed in my ear. "Don't make a sound." Once inside, he slammed the door, throwing all 3 locks and dragging a chair in front of it. His face was sheet white, his eyes wild as he checked each window, making sure they were locked. "Dad, what?" I started, my voice shaking. "Be quiet," he snapped, but his voice lacked the anger from earlier. Instead, he sounded terrified. "Go upstairs, wake your mother, tell her to pack a bag, essentials only, be quick about it." "But the scarecrows, they were moving. They had something." Dad gripped my shoulders, his fingers digging in painfully. For the first time in my life, I saw raw fear in my father's eyes. "Listen to me, Timothy. There are things in this world you don't understand. Things I've tried to protect you from. But he swallowed hard. "Just get your mother, now." I ran upstairs to my parents' bedroom, but it was empty. The bed was unmade, Mom's reading glasses still on her nightstand, but she wasn't there. "Mom," I called, checking the bathroom. Nothing. When I came back downstairs to tell Dad, he was standing by the window, looking out at the cornfield with a shotgun in his hands. "She's not up there," I said. He didn't turn around. "Go pack a bag, Timothy, we're leaving." "But Mom, now!" he roared, finally turning to face me. In the dim light of the living room, his face looked hollow, aged 10 years in the span of minutes. I did as I was told, throwing clothes and a few prized possessions into my school backpack. All the while, questions raced through my mind. Where was Mom? What were those things in the field? Why were we running? When I came back down, Dad was still by the window. The shotgun trembled slightly in his hands. "Where's Mom?" I asked again. Dad's shoulders slumped. "Get in the truck, son." "Not without Mom." I was crying now, the terror of the night finally catching up to me. He turned to me, his eyes red-rimmed and hollow. "She went to check on the chickens after you went to bed. She knows not to go out after dark. She knows the rules." His voice broke on the last word. A scream cut through the night, distant but unmistakably human. A woman's scream coming from the direction of the cornfield. It was quickly muffled, cut off mid-cry. "Mom!" I started for the door, but Dad caught me, holding me back with surprising strength. "It's too late," he whispered, and I could feel him trembling. "We have to go, now." He dragged me to the truck, throwing our bags in the bed and pushing me into the passenger seat. As he started the engine, I looked back at our house, at the cornfield beyond where something was still moving among the stalks. "Dad, we can't just leave her." I was sobbing now, my whole body shaking. Dad's knuckles were white on the steering wheel as he floored the gas, sending gravel flying as we tore down the driveway. "I thought I did everything right," he muttered, more to himself than to me. "I placed the pylons exactly as Grandpa showed me. I fed the field what it needed. I kept the boundaries. I did everything right." "What are you talking about?" I screamed at him. "We have to go back for Mom." He just kept driving, his eyes fixed on the road ahead, repeating over and over, "I thought I did everything right." We drove all night, stopping only for gas. Dad wouldn't let me out of the truck, not even to use the bathroom. By morning, we were 3 states away, checking into a motel under fake names. That became our life, moving from place to place, never staying anywhere long enough to put down roots. Dad never explained what happened that night, and he shut down completely whenever I asked about Mom. He started drinking heavily, working odd jobs that paid cash, and jumping at shadows. I ran away when I was 17, couldn't take the nomadic existence and Dad's increasing paranoia anymore. I made a life for myself, went to college on scholarships, became an accountant of all things, something stable, predictable, with clear rules that made sense. I tried to convince myself that what I saw that night was just a child's imagination, twisted by fear and darkness. But deep down, I knew better. Dad died last year, liver failure from decades of heavy drinking. Among his few possessions was a worn journal with detailed instructions for the protections he'd maintained on the farm, passed down through generations of Brinkwoods. Reading it, I realized our farm wasn't just built on land. It was built on a pact, a terrible arrangement made by my great-great-grandfather during the Dust Bowl, when farms were failing and families were starving. The land needed feeding, and not with the usual fertilizers. 2 weeks ago, I finally worked up the courage to go back. The farm had been abandoned since we fled that night. The house was a crumbling shell, windows broken, roof partially collapsed. The barn had burned down at some point. But the cornfield, that was the strangest part. Despite decades of neglect, corn still grew there, tall and unnaturally green among the otherwise barren landscape. And the scarecrows were still there. Not the same ones. These were more decayed, barely held together, but in the exact same diamond pattern around the field. I brought a shovel. I don't know what compelled me to start digging in the center of that field, but something inside me knew what I would find. It didn't take long before my shovel hit something solid. Not rock, bone. I kept digging, my hands bleeding through my gloves, tears streaming down my face. There were bones everywhere, skulls and femurs and countless smaller fragments, buried in neat rows throughout the field. Some looked ancient, others more recent. I recognized my mother's wedding ring on one of the skeletal hands. Our farm had thrived because my father, like his father before him, had been feeding it with human sacrifices. The scarecrows weren't there to keep birds away. They were guardians, collectors, harvesters of a different kind of crop. I've reported my findings to the police, but I haven't told them everything. How could I explain the moving scarecrows or why my father was so terrified that night? They're treating it as a historical crime scene, a bizarre case of serial killing spanning generations. But I know the truth. And I know that something still walks in that cornfield at night. Something that remembers the taste of human fear and flesh. Something that might still be hungry. I check the locks 3 times before bed now. I'll never live anywhere near a farm again. And sometimes, when the wind blows just right outside my window, I swear I can hear the rustle of corn stalks and the muffled screams of those who fed our land. I still have nightmares about that night. Even now, typing this makes my hands shake. I've never shared this with anyone outside my community before, but I need to get it out. Maybe writing it down will help me process what happened, though I doubt it. Some things just stay with you. I work, or worked I guess, as an assistant to a medicine man named Ahansi on the Pine Ridge Reservation. He's in his 60s, has been practicing traditional medicine for most of his life, and people come to him when modern medicine or the church can't help them. I'm not a medicine man myself, just someone who helps out, drives him places, and learns what I can. About 7 months ago, a man named Max came to us. I'll never forget the look in his eyes. Hollow, desperate, like he hadn't slept in weeks. His clothes hung off him like he'd lost a lot of weight quickly. He told us his family was being destroyed by suicide, one by one. My brother hung himself last month, he told us, voice cracking. Then my son, my only son, he was only 19, shot himself just 3 days later. My sister tried to hang herself too, but someone found her. She died anyway 2 weeks later, driving drunk into a ditch. He couldn't stop shaking the whole time he spoke. I've seen grief before, living on the res, but this was different. This was terror mixed with grief. Something's in my house, he said. I hear it at night. I see shadows moving when nothing's there. I feel like I'm next, like it wants me next. Ahansi listened quietly, nodding occasionally, his weathered face giving nothing away. When Max finished, Ahansi just said, "I'll come tomorrow, be home at noon." After Max left, I asked Ahansi what he thought. "This is bad," he said simply. "I need to prepare tonight. No food, only prayer." I knew better than to ask more questions. When Ahansi gets like that, serious, focused, you just do what he says. The next day, we drove to Max's house, a small, run-down place at the edge of the reservation. It was a sunny day, but the house seemed to sit in its own personal cloud of gloom. Paint peeling, windows dirty, dead grass in the yard. The whole place felt wrong somehow, like the air around it was heavier. Max let us in, looking even worse than the day before. Inside, the house was cold despite the warm day outside. There were pictures on the walls of Max's family, his brother, his son, his sister. Happy moments frozen in time, before whatever happened. Ahansi walked through the house slowly, touching door frames, pausing in corners, sometimes closing his eyes like he was listening to something I couldn't hear. He spent almost an hour just moving through the small house. In the son's bedroom, he stood for a long time, his hand pressed against the wall where a bullet hole had been patched but still showed through. Finally, he turned to Max. "This is not a normal spirit, not an ancestor, not something that belongs here." Max just nodded, like he'd known all along. "We need to come back tonight," Ahansi said, "when it's dark, when it moves." "What is it?" Max asked, his voice barely a whisper. Ahansi shook his head. "Better you don't know yet. Just be somewhere else tonight. Go to a relative's house. Don't come back until morning." In the car, driving back, I finally asked Ahansi what we were dealing with. "Something that feeds on despair," he said. "It finds vulnerable people already hurting, and it pushes them over the edge. Then it feeds on the pain of those left behind." "A demon?" I asked. "No. Worse. Demons at least have rules they follow. This thing—" He stopped, looking out the window. "This thing is old, older than our people on this land. It moves between worlds. Tonight, we watch for it." I spent the rest of the day feeling sick with dread. Ahansi continued fasting and praying, and I tried to do the same, though my stomach kept cramping with hunger and fear. That night, around 11 p.m., we drove back to Max's area. But instead of going to the house, Ahansi had me park about a quarter-mile away, near where the road curved past a small stand of trees. "Here," he said, "it will pass here." "How do you know?" I asked. "Because this is where Max's sister died. This curve in the road, this ditch." He pointed to a spot where the guardrail was still bent from the impact. "It feeds at the places of death, then moves between them." We got out, and Ahansi directed me to hide with him in the ditch beside the road. The night was clear, stars bright above us, but cold for early fall. No moon. The darkness between the stars seemed deeper than usual. We sat in silence for what felt like hours. The only sounds were crickets, the occasional car passing on the distant highway, and our breathing. My legs cramped, my back ached, but I didn't dare move or complain. Then Ahansi tensed beside me. "Listen," he whispered. At first I heard nothing, then faintly the sound of an engine. But not like a normal car engine. This was a strange, uneven rhythm, like something mechanically wrong, a sick, stuttering sound. "Don't move," Ahansi warned. "No matter what you see, don't run." The sound grew louder, but I still couldn't see anything on the road. Then, suddenly, headlights appeared around the bend, weak, yellowish lights that didn't seem to illuminate much of the road ahead of them. As the vehicle approached, I could make out its shape. It was an old car, maybe from the 50s, black and boxy, but something was wrong with it. It seemed incomplete, like a drawing of a car rather than a real one. I realized with a shock that it had no doors, no windows, no windshield, just the frame of a car with seats inside, the engine somehow running. It should have been impossible. A car with no windows should have let the sound of the engine pour out, but instead the sick, stuttering noise seemed muffled, contained, and there was no exhaust coming from the back, despite the engine clearly running. The car slowed as it approached the spot where Max's sister had died, then stopped completely, idling on the empty road. That's when the smell hit me, not gasoline or exhaust, but something rotten and sweet at the same time. The smell of old meat left in the sun, the smell of death. Ahansi stood up slowly from our hiding place. I wanted to grab his arm, pull him back down, but I was frozen in place, my body refusing to move. He walked toward the car, his steps steady, his right hand clutching a small leather pouch I knew contained sacred herbs and tobacco. As he approached the driver's side of the car, I finally found the courage to move. I crept forward, staying low, trying to see past Ahansi to whoever, whatever, was driving. What I saw will haunt me until I die. The driver wasn't human. It had the basic shape of a person, but its face was painted white, like a clown, with dark symbols drawn across the forehead and cheeks, twisted, ugly symbols that hurt my eyes to look at. Its eyes were wrong, too big, too round, and they seemed to glow from within with a sickly yellow light. Its mouth was stretched in a smile that was too wide for any human face, revealing teeth that were sharp and uneven. Its hair stuck out in matted clumps, not quite dreadlocks, more like hair that had been soaked in something that made it clump together. It wore clothes that might once have been colorful but were now stained dark in places and frayed at the edges. But the worst part, the part that still wakes me up at night, was that in the back seat I could see what looked like people. Faint, like they were made of smoke or fog, but people nonetheless. Some I recognized from pictures in Max's house, his brother, his son, his sister. But there were others too, so many others, all with the same expression of quiet despair. Some were crying soundlessly. Others just stared ahead with empty eyes. They weren't solid. They seemed to flicker in and out like a bad TV reception. They were souls, trapped souls, collected by this thing. Ahansi stopped at the driver's window, or where a window would be if the car had windows. He began speaking in our language, words of power I only partially understood, prayers for protection, for banishment. The clown thing turned its head toward him, that terrible smile growing impossibly wider. Ahansi reached into the car with his right hand, seeming to grab something invisible. With his left hand, he made a sweeping motion over the back seat passengers, still chanting prayers. The spirits in the back seat began to change. The fog that made up their forms started to lift upward, streaming out through the open roof of the car, floating up toward the stars like wisps of smoke from a dying fire. The clown began to laugh. The sound was like nothing I've ever heard before or since. Not human, not animal. It was the sound of madness itself. As it laughed, I felt my throat begin to tighten. I couldn't breathe. It was like invisible hands were choking me, squeezing tighter with each second. I fell to my knees, clutching at my throat, black spots dancing in my vision. I was going to die here, on this empty road, choked by the laughter of a monster. Then Ahansi was beside me, one hand on my shoulder, the other pressing a small cloth bundle against my stomach. "Cough," he commanded. "Cough it out." I tried, though there was no air in my lungs to cough with. But something shifted inside me, and suddenly I could draw in a tiny breath. I coughed, and something that tasted like ash and copper came up my throat. I spat it onto the ground and didn't look at what came out. When I could breathe again, I looked up. The clown's laugh had turned into a horrible scream, a sound like metal tearing, like animals dying, like children in pain. The car was smoking now, but not normal smoke. This was black and oily, and it stank of chemicals and rot and something else, something older and worse. The car began to fade, first the edges becoming transparent, then the body, then the clown itself, its scream lingering in the air even after it had completely vanished. Ahansi helped me to my feet. I was shaking so badly I could barely stand. "What?" I tried to ask, but my throat was still raw. "Not here," Ahansi said. "We need to go to Max's house now." We drove in silence. I couldn't have spoken if I wanted to. My mind kept replaying what I'd seen, trying to make sense of it, failing completely. Max's house looked different when we arrived. The air around it seemed lighter somehow. The same peeling paint and dirty windows, but without that feeling of heaviness, of dread. Max wasn't there, of course. Ahansi had told him to stay away, but Ahansi used the spare key Max had given him to let us in. He went straight to the kitchen, filled a pot with water, and put it on the stove. While the water heated, he turned to me. "You have questions." My voice was still rough, but I could speak now. "What was that thing?" "It has many names in many tribes. Our people call it Nagi Yuta, eater of souls. It finds families with old pain, old trauma, and it feeds on their despair. It pushes them to end their lives, then traps their spirits, using their pain to feed itself." "Why Max's family?" Ahansi shrugged. "Bad luck, maybe. Or maybe there was something already there. Unresolved grief, historical trauma. Many of our people carry these burdens. The thing finds the cracks and widens them until people break. Those symbols on its face, don't think about them," Ahansi cut me off sharply. "Don't try to remember them. They're doors in your mind. If you remember them too clearly, it can find its way in." That shut me up quick. The water was boiling now, and Ahansi added herbs from his medicine bag, filling the kitchen with a clean, sharp smell that helped clear the memory of the car's stench from my nose. "What did you pull out of the car?" I asked after a while. Ahansi poured the herbal tea into 2 cups before answering. "The connection. The thing had lines like fishing lines hooked into the family members. I cut them." "And the spirits? Max's family?" "Free now. Gone to where they should have gone in the first place." He handed me a cup. "Drink. It will help with the throat." The tea burned going down, but in a good way, like it was cleaning out whatever that thing had left inside me. "Will it come back?" I asked, the question I'd been most afraid to voice. Ahansi considered this. "Not for Max, I think. We broke its hold on that family, but it's still out there, still hunting." We sat in silence until dawn, drinking tea, occasionally adding more hot water to our cups. When the first light came through the kitchen window, Ahansi called Max and told him it was safe to come home. Max arrived about 20 minutes later. The change in him was immediate and obvious. He stood straighter, his eyes clearer, like a massive weight had been lifted from him. "Something's different," he said, looking around his own kitchen like he'd never seen it before. "The air, it's easier to breathe." Ahansi nodded. "The thing that was hunting your family is gone. Your brother, your son, your sister, they're at peace now." Max's eyes filled with tears. "What was it?" "Why us?" Ahansi explained as gently as he could about the thing in the car. How it fed on despair and pain. How it targeted vulnerable families. How it was drawn to places where trauma runs deep. Places like reservations, where historical wounds are still raw. "What do I do now?" Max asked when Ahansi finished. "Live," Ahansi said simply. "Live better. Maybe move away from this place. Too many bad memories here. Start fresh somewhere. Break the cycle." As we were leaving, Max hugged us both, his grip desperate, grateful. "I don't know how to repay you," he said. Ahansi just shook his head. "No payment, just live." In the car, driving away, I finally asked the question that had been bothering me since the night before. That thing, the clown thing, what was it trying to do to me when it laughed? Why couldn't I breathe? Ahansi kept his eyes on the road. "It was trying to put a hook in you, like the ones in Max's family. It wanted to add you to its collection." "Why didn't it affect you?" "Protection," he said, touching the medicine pouch around his neck. "And practice. I've faced it before." That stopped me cold. "Before? Where?" "Different reservations, different families. It moves around, finds new hunting grounds when it's driven away from old ones. So it's still out there. Ahansi nodded. Yes, it will always be out there. Some evils can't be destroyed completely, only driven away for a time. We rode in silence for a while before he added, "That's why the work is never done, why we keep watch, why we fight." I haven't gone back to work with Ahansi since that night. I told him I needed time, and he understood. But I know I'll go back eventually, because like he said, the work is never done. And now I know what's out there, hunting in the dark. Sometimes late at night I think I hear a car engine, that sick stuttering sound. I cover my ears and pray until it passes. And I never ever look out the window, afraid of what I might see parked on my street. Its driver smiling up at my house with that impossibly wide grin. Because I know what it wants. It wants me to remember those symbols, to trace them in my mind until they open a door. And I know with absolute certainty that one day I'll hear that engine again, for real. And I don't know if I'll be strong enough to keep that door closed when it comes. I still remember every detail of that night 8 months ago, and my hands shake just typing this out. My wife Emma and I had only been married for about 8 months when her parents died in a car crash on the interstate. It was sudden and devastating for her. They were wealthy people who owned this massive 200-acre estate in upstate New York with this beautiful colonial house that had to be worth at least $1 million. Emma was their only child, or so I thought, and they left everything to her. We had been living in a small apartment in Buffalo, both working regular jobs. I was doing IT for a local company, and Emma worked at an ARC home for adults with disabilities. The inheritance changed everything overnight. Emma decided she wanted to move into her childhood home, and even though I had a weird feeling about it, I agreed. It was her family home after all, and I wanted to support her through her grief. The place was gorgeous, but intimidating as hell. 3 stories, hardwood everywhere, antique furniture that probably cost more than my car, and surrounded by these massive oak trees. It was the kind of place where you could go for a walk on your own property and not see another house for miles. Emma grew up there, so she was comfortable right away, but I felt out of place from day one. I don't consider myself superstitious, but I swear that house never felt empty, even when I was alone. After about a month of living there, I started noticing weird things. I'd be working from home in the study, and I'd get this prickling sensation on the back of my neck, like someone was standing right behind me. I'd spin around in my chair, and of course nobody would be there. Or I'd be taking a shower, and I'd hear what sounded like footsteps in the hallway outside the bathroom. Emma always brushed it off. She'd say, "Old houses make noises, babe," or "It's probably just the pipes." Emma kept her job at the ARC home, even though she probably didn't need to work anymore. She said it gave her purpose, and I respected that. Her shift was typically 4 p.m. to midnight, 4 days a week. I usually used those evenings to unwind, sometimes having a couple beers, smoking a little weed, which Emma didn't approve of, and watching movies in our bedroom. This particular Friday night, May 15th, started like any other. Emma left for work around 3:30, kissing me goodbye in the driveway before driving off in her white Honda Civic. I ordered a pizza, grabbed a 6-pack from the fridge, and settled in for the night. Around 8 p.m., I rolled a joint and started watching this horror movie I'd been wanting to see. Honestly, getting a little high in that huge house helped with the constant feeling of being watched. I was about halfway through the movie when I heard a noise downstairs. It sounded like pots and pans clanging in the kitchen. My first thought was that someone had broken in, and my heart started pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I muted the TV and listened. More noises came from the kitchen, drawers opening, water running. It sounded like someone was cooking. I quietly got out of bed and grabbed the baseball bat I kept next to the nightstand. As I crept down the hallway toward the stairs, I heard humming. A woman's voice, humming a song that sounded familiar. I slowly made my way down the stairs, gripping the bat so tightly my knuckles turned white. When I reached the bottom of the stairs, I could smell food cooking, something with garlic and cheese. I rounded the corner into the kitchen, bat raised, and what I saw made me freeze in place. Emma was standing at the stove, stirring something in a large pot. She was wearing jeans and a green sweater I recognized, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, the way she always wore it for work. "Emma?" I lowered the bat, completely confused. "What are you doing home? I thought you were working until midnight." She turned and smiled at me, the same smile I'd fallen in love with. "Hey, we were overstaffed tonight, so they let me go early. I thought I'd surprise you with some chicken Alfredo." She nodded toward the pot. "It'll be ready in about 20 minutes. I stood there trying to process what was happening. "Why didn't you call to tell me you were coming home?" She shrugged. "I wanted to surprise you, plus my phone died at work." She gestured to her phone on the counter. "It's charging now." Something felt off, but I couldn't place it. Maybe it was the weed making me paranoid. Or maybe it was the fact that in 8 months of marriage, Emma had never once been let go early from her shift. They were usually understaffed, not overstaffed. "Are you okay?" she asked, tilting her head slightly. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Yeah," I said, setting the bat down against the wall. "Just surprised, that's all." "And a little high," I admitted. She frowned slightly. "I can smell it. You know how I feel about that stuff." "Sorry." I felt a twinge of guilt. "I thought you wouldn't be home until late." She turned back to the stove. "Go finish your movie. I'll call you when dinner's ready." I hesitated for a moment. Something still didn't feel right. Emma seemed different somehow. Her voice was slightly off, her movements not quite the same. But again, I chalked it up to the weed, making me paranoid. "Okay," I said finally. "Thanks for cooking." I went back upstairs to our bedroom and unpaused my movie, but I couldn't focus on it anymore. I kept thinking about Emma downstairs. Why would they let her go early on a Friday night? The ARC home was always busiest on weekends. And why didn't she seem tired? She usually came home exhausted after her shifts. About 15 minutes later, my cell phone rang. I grabbed it from the nightstand and looked at the caller ID. Emma. My blood ran cold. I stared at the screen, watching it light up with my wife's name and picture. With trembling fingers, I answered the call. "Hello?" "Hey, babe." Emma's voice came through the speaker. "Just checking in. How's your night going?" I couldn't speak. My throat closed up, and I felt like I was going to throw up. "Mark, you there?" Emma asked. "Where are you?" I managed to whisper. "At work, of course. Just on my dinner break. Are you okay? You sound weird." I got up and quietly walked to the bedroom door, closing it as silently as possible and turning the lock. "Mark, what's going on?" Emma's voice was concerned now. "Someone's here," I whispered into the phone. "Someone who looks exactly like you. She's downstairs in the kitchen cooking dinner. She told me you got let off work early." There was silence on the other end of the line for what felt like an eternity. "Oh my God," Emma finally said, her voice shaking. "Mark, listen to me very carefully. That's not me. It's my sister, my twin sister." "Your what?" I hissed, trying to keep my voice down. "You never told me you had a sister, let alone a twin." I know. I'm so sorry. We don't talk about her in my family. She's been in and out of prison and psychiatric hospitals for years. My parents disowned her when we were 19. She's not well, Mark." My mind was racing, trying to process this information while also dealing with the fact that a stranger, a potentially dangerous stranger, was in our kitchen right now. "What's her name?" I asked. "Elizabeth. We call her Beth." Just then, I heard footsteps on the stairs. Slow, deliberate footsteps coming up toward our bedroom. "She's coming upstairs," I whispered, panic rising in my chest. "Mark, listen to me." Emma's voice was urgent now. "Lock the door and call 911 right now. Beth is dangerous. She's been diagnosed with severe mental health issues and has a history of violence. Please call the police immediately." "Mark?" Beth's voice, identical to Emma's but somehow colder, called from the hallway. "Dinner's almost ready. Where are you?" I hung up on Emma and immediately dialed 911, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hit the numbers. "911, what's your emergency?" the dispatcher answered. "There's an intruder in my house," I whispered, moving away from the door and into our bathroom. "My wife's estranged twin sister. I'm locked in the bedroom, but I think she might be trying to hurt me." "Mark, why did you lock the door?" Beth called, jiggling the handle. "Open up, dinner's getting cold." I gave the dispatcher our address and explained the situation as quietly as I could. "Stay on the line, sir. Officers are on their way. ETA about 12 minutes. 12 minutes. It might as well have been 12 hours. "Mark, I know you're in there." Beth's voice had changed now, harder and more insistent. "Open this door right now." "What do you want?" I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. "I just want to talk," she said, her tone suddenly sweet again. "About the house, about what's rightfully mine." I stayed silent, pressing myself against the bathroom wall. "This was supposed to be my inheritance, too," she suddenly shouted, all pretense of being Emma gone. "Half of everything was supposed to be mine, but they wrote me out of the will. They gave everything to perfect little Emma." I heard a loud thud against the door. She was trying to break it down. "Emma doesn't deserve this house. She doesn't deserve any of this." Another thud, and I could hear the wood of the door frame starting to splinter. "But if something were to happen to both of you, well, I'm still next of kin, aren't I?" The 911 dispatcher was asking if I had any weapons in the house. I told her no, just the baseball bat that I'd left downstairs. Stupid mistake. The thuds against the door stopped suddenly. I heard Beth's footsteps moving away down the hall. For a moment, I thought maybe she was leaving, but then I heard drawers being opened and slammed shut in the guest room across the hall. She was looking for something. "Sir, officers are about 5 minutes out," the dispatcher told me. "Stay where you are." Those 5 minutes were the longest of my life. I could hear Beth moving around, opening and closing doors, muttering to herself. Then she came back to our bedroom door. "Found it," she said in a sing-song voice that made my skin crawl. "Found Dad's gun. Now, are you going to open this door, or am I going to have to shoot it open?" My heart was hammering so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. I told the dispatcher what was happening, and she assured me officers were almost there. Just as Beth was counting down from 10, threatening to shoot after she reached 1, I heard sirens in the distance. Beth must have heard them too, because she suddenly went quiet. "You called the cops," she said flatly. Big mistake. I heard her footsteps moving quickly down the hall and then down the stairs. By the time the police arrived, she was gone. They found the back door wide open and Beth had disappeared into the woods surrounding the property. When the police searched the kitchen, they found the pot of chicken Alfredo still on the stove. Tests later revealed it contained enough arsenic to kill 3 people. They also found a large kitchen knife stuck into the wooden table, pinning down a note that simply read, "The house is mine." Emma arrived home about an hour later, hysterical and terrified. That's when she finally told me the full story about Beth. They had been close as children, but as teenagers, Beth began exhibiting increasingly erratic and violent behavior. When they were 17, Beth had pushed Emma down a flight of stairs in what she claimed was an accident. At 19, Beth was arrested for assaulting Emma's boyfriend at the time, claiming he had tried to rape her. He hadn't. She spent time in both prison and psychiatric facilities over the next decade, and Emma's parents eventually cut all ties with her, removing her from their will and refusing to acknowledge her existence. The police searched the woods and surrounding areas but found no sign of Beth. They issued an APB, but she seemed to have vanished. Emma showed them photos of Beth from years ago, and despite being identical twins, there were subtle differences I hadn't noticed in my shock and confusion. A small scar above Beth's eyebrow, slightly more angular features. We installed a security system the very next day. Cameras, motion sensors, the works. Emma took a leave of absence from her job, and we barely left the house for weeks, jumping at every noise and shadow. It's been 8 months now, and Beth still hasn't been found. The police think she might have left the state, possibly even the country, but I don't believe that. Sometimes I still get that feeling of being watched when I'm alone in the house. Sometimes I see movement out of the corner of my eye when I'm walking the property. We've talked about selling the house and moving away, but Emma refuses. It's her family home, she says. She won't let Beth take that from her, too. So we stay, living in a constant state of vigilance. I've stopped smoking weed entirely. I need to stay alert. Every time Emma leaves for work, I make her call me when she arrives and before she heads home. We have a code word now, something Beth wouldn't know. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and stare at my wife's sleeping face, studying her features, looking for that scar above her eyebrow that isn't there, making sure it's really Emma beside me. Because the most terrifying part of all this wasn't the arsenic or the knife or the note. It was how easily I was fooled, how I looked at Beth's face, a face identical to the woman I love, and didn't immediately know something was wrong. It makes me question everything, even myself. I don't know if we'll ever feel safe here again. I don't know if Beth will come back to finish what she started. All I know is that somewhere out there is a woman with my wife's face who wants us dead, and there's nothing more terrifying than that. I haven't spoken about this to anyone outside my family for almost 3 years. Even now, my hands are shaking as I type this. I guess I'm hoping someone here might have had a similar experience or can make sense of what happened to us that night. Back in August 2020, my parents, my younger sister Emma, 15, and I, 17 at the time, planned a trip to visit my dad's old college friend Joey, who lived on the Navajo reservation in Arizona. Dad and Joey had kept in touch over the years, but we'd never actually visited him before. Joey had invited us multiple times, saying he wanted to show us the beauty of his homeland, so we finally decided to make the journey from our home in Salt Lake City. We left early on a Saturday, around 6 a.m. The plan was to drive straight there, which was supposed to take about 7 hours. Dad was excited to see Joey and kept telling us stories about their college days as we drove. Mom packed a ton of snacks, and Emma and I had our phones loaded with movies for the drive. It was supposed to be a simple road trip. What should have been a 7-hour drive turned into almost 21 hours of pure hell. First, Dad's truck started acting up somewhere around Moab. We spent nearly 4 hours at a garage waiting for a part. Then there was a massive accident on the highway that had us at a standstill for another 2 hours. By evening, we were way behind schedule, but Dad insisted on pushing through rather than stopping for the night. "Joey's expecting us," he kept saying. "We'll get there late, but we'll get there." As night fell, we drove through increasingly remote areas. The roads became narrower, the towns more scattered. Mom called Joey around 10 p.m. to let him know we were still coming, but running very late. He told us he'd wait up and had set up camp for us near his place. By 1 a.m., Emma and Mom had fallen asleep in the back seat. I was fighting to stay awake in the passenger seat to keep Dad company. The radio only picked up static, and the headlights seemed to barely cut through the darkness. There were no streetlights out there, and the moon was just a sliver. Dad's GPS kept losing signal, so we were following printed directions Joey had emailed us. Around 3 a.m., Dad nudged me and pointed ahead. "We're finally entering the Navajo Nation," he whispered, not wanting to wake Mom and Emma. I sat up straight, trying to shake off my drowsiness. The truck's headlights illuminated a large sign at the side of the road. "Welcome to the Navajo Nation." Under normal circumstances, I would have been excited to finally reach our destination, but something felt off. As we approached the sign, I noticed movement behind it. At first, I thought my tired eyes were playing tricks on me. But no, there was definitely something there. Something that didn't belong. It looked like a deer at first glance, the same general shape and size. But as we got closer, I realized it was standing on its hind legs. Not like a deer rearing up, but standing straight, like a human. Its front legs hung down weirdly at its sides, almost like arms. The proportions were all wrong. Too long, too thin, joints bending in ways they shouldn't. As our headlights swept across it, the thing turned its head toward our truck. Its eyes caught the light and glowed an unnatural yellow-green, much brighter than any normal animal's eyeshine. Its neck stretched and twisted at an impossible angle as it tracked our movement. "Dad," I whispered, my mouth suddenly dry. "Do you see that?" Dad slowed the truck slightly, squinting through the windshield. "See what?" I pointed toward the sign, but as the headlights fully illuminated the area, there was nothing there, just darkness and desert scrub. "There was something behind the sign," I said. "Like a deer, but standing up, standing wrong." Dad gave me a concerned look. "You're exhausted, buddy. Your eyes are playing tricks on you. We're almost there now." I nodded, trying to convince myself he was right, but I knew what I'd seen, and I knew it wasn't normal. We drove for another half hour, following Joey's directions down increasingly remote dirt roads. The truck's headlights bounced wildly as we navigated the uneven terrain. Finally, we saw a campfire in the distance, and as we approached, Joey emerged from a small trailer home, waving. Dad parked, and we all climbed out, stiff from the long drive. Joey hugged Dad, then greeted Mom, Emma, and me warmly. He looked exactly like the photos Dad had shown us, tall, with long hair pulled back in a ponytail, laugh lines around his eyes. "Man, you guys must be exhausted," Joey said. "I've got the tent set up for you over there, and there's coffee brewing inside." Dad nodded and started to unload our bags from the truck. "Thanks for waiting up for us, Joe. It's been one hell of a drive." Joey helped with the bags. No problem, everything okay on the road? That's when Dad mentioned what I'd seen. I hadn't planned to bring it up. It sounded crazy even in my head. But Dad casually said, "Yeah, except Ryan here thought he saw some kind of mutant deer by the welcome sign, standing on two legs, if you can believe it." I expected Joey to laugh it off like Dad had. Instead, he froze. The bag he was holding dropped to the ground. In the firelight, I could see his face had gone completely pale. "What did you just say?" Joey's voice was barely audible. Dad looked confused. "Ryan thought he saw something weird by the welcome sign. I told him he was just tired." Joey grabbed Dad's arm, cutting him off. He pulled him a few feet away and started whispering urgently. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but Joey's body language was alarming. Tense, agitated, constantly looking over his shoulder into the darkness beyond the firelight. Mom, who'd been helping Emma get settled, noticed something was wrong and walked over to them. Joey immediately included her in the hushed conversation. I saw Mom's hand go to her mouth, her eyes widening. Within seconds, the entire mood changed. Joey rushed to the trailer and emerged with a duffel bag. "Pack up, now. Everything back in the truck." "What's going on?" Emma asked, confused and still half asleep. No one answered her. Dad came over to us, his face grim. "Kids, get back in the truck. Leave the tent. Just grab your personal bags." "Dad, what?" "Now, Ryan!" I'd never heard that tone in Dad's voice before. I grabbed my backpack and guided Emma back to the truck while Mom and Dad quickly gathered our things. Joey was moving faster than any of us, throwing his own possessions into his truck. Within 5 minutes, we were back in our vehicle, engine running. Joey approached Dad's window, speaking quickly. "Follow me to the main road, then you need to head north, back the way you came. Don't stop anywhere on the reservation, not for anything or anyone. I'll call you once you're off Navajo land." "Joey, what the hell is happening?" Dad demanded. Joey shook his head. "I can't explain now. Just follow me out, then drive. Don't stop until you're past the welcome sign. I'll call you." He sprinted to his own truck and took off down the dirt road. Dad followed, tires kicking up dust as we accelerated. "Dad?" Emma was crying now, frightened by the sudden panic. "It's okay, honey," Mom said from the back seat, but her voice was shaking. "We just need to leave. Joey says there might be a storm coming." It was a transparent lie. The sky was clear, stars visible everywhere, but neither Emma nor I questioned it further. We followed Joey's taillights for about 15 minutes until we reached a paved road. He pulled over briefly, pointed north, then sped off in the opposite direction. Dad immediately turned north, pushing the truck as fast as it would go on the empty desert highway. Joey called Dad's cell phone, which was connected to the truck's Bluetooth. "Are you on the main road heading north?" "Yes," Dad answered. "Joey, you need to tell me what's going on. You're scaring my family. Keep driving. Don't slow down. How far are you from where you saw that thing?" Dad looked at me. I shrugged helplessly. "Maybe 30-40 minutes, I guessed." Joey was quiet for a moment. "Listen to me carefully. Don't stop driving. Don't pull over for anything. If you see anything unusual, animals, people, anything, ignore it. Don't look at it. Don't talk about it. Joey, promise me, Mark. Promise me right now." "I promise," Dad said, knuckles white on the steering wheel. "Call me when you cross the reservation boundary. I'll stay on the phone until then." Joey kept talking, asking Dad about the truck's fuel level, if we had water, random questions that seemed designed to keep Dad focused on driving. I stared out the window, scanning the darkness, my heart racing. Every shadow, every rock formation seemed to move in the corner of my eye. We'd been driving for about 20 minutes when we rounded a bend and Dad slammed on the brakes. The truck skidded slightly before coming to a halt. The road ahead was blocked. It wasn't a landslide or official roadblock. Someone had deliberately piled large rocks across the entire width of the highway. There was no way around without going off-road. "Joey," Dad said, his voice tight. "The road's blocked. Rocks." Joey's response was immediate and terrifying. He didn't ask for clarification or details. He just started shouting, "Go through it! Go around! Now! Now!" Dad jerked the wheel, taking us onto the desert hardpan beside the road. The truck bounced violently as we navigated around the rock pile. That's when we heard it. A sound I still hear in my nightmares. A screech that started like an elk's bugle, but twisted into something so wrong, so human, yet not human, that it seemed to bypass my ears and claw directly into my brain. It came from somewhere ahead of us, maybe 50 feet away in the darkness. Emma screamed. Mom was praying in the back seat. "It's there," I gasped, pointing into the darkness ahead where I thought I'd seen movement. "Joey!" Dad shouted into the phone. "We hear something!" Joey's voice was strained, desperate. "Keep driving! Don't look at it! Don't stop!" Dad floored the accelerator. The truck's engine roared as we bumped back onto the paved road past the rock barrier. I couldn't help myself. I looked out the window, scanning the darkness. For a split second, illuminated by our taillights, I saw a figure. Tall, impossibly thin, on 2 legs. Not the deer thing from before, but something worse. Something with proportions all wrong, limbs too long, movements too jerky. It was running, not toward us, but parallel to the road, keeping pace with our speeding truck. I closed my eyes and pressed my face into my hands. "It's following us," I whispered. "Don't look at it," Joey's voice commanded through the speakers. "None of you look outside. Mark, just drive." We drove in terrified silence for what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes. The only sounds were Emma's quiet sobbing, Mom's whispered prayers, and Joey's occasional voice asking Dad if we were okay. Finally, Dad let out a long breath. "There's the sign. We're leaving the reservation." As we passed the welcome sign, "Now a farewell," Joey's relief was audible. "Keep going. Get to Kayenta. There's a Holiday Inn there. Get a room. I'll call you in an hour." Dad agreed, and the call ended. No one spoke as we drove to Kayenta, found the hotel, and checked in. It was nearly 5 a.m. The sky was starting to lighten. In the hotel room, Emma finally fell asleep, curled up against Mom. Dad paced by the window, jumping at every sound. I sat on the edge of the bed, unable to close my eyes without seeing that figure running alongside our truck. Joey called at exactly 6 a.m. Dad put him on speaker. "Are you all okay?" Joey asked. "We're safe," Dad replied. "Now tell me what the hell happened back there." Joey was silent for a long moment. "I can't discuss it over the phone. You need to stay there today. Rest. Tomorrow morning before you leave, I'm sending someone to you, an elder from my community. He's going to perform a blessing for all of you and your vehicle. Joey, please, Mark, for your family's safety." Dad agreed, and Joey gave him the details for the meeting the next day. We spent the entire day in that hotel room. None of us wanted to go outside. We ordered pizza delivery for dinner and watched mindless TV shows without really seeing them. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that figure, the wrong deer by the sign, the running shape in our tail lights. The next morning, an elderly Navajo man came to our room. He didn't introduce himself and barely spoke English. He performed some kind of ceremony, burning herbs and speaking in Navajo while moving around each of us. He did the same to our truck in the parking lot. Before leaving, he He pressed small medicine pouches into each of our hands, motioning that we should keep them with us. We drove home to Salt Lake City that day. The trip was silent except for necessary conversation. When we got home, Mom threw away the clothes we'd worn that night. Dad sold his truck 2 weeks later. Joey called once to make sure we'd gotten home safely. Dad asked him again what had happened, what we'd seen. "Some things are better not discussed," Joey said. "Just be grateful you're all safe." That was the last time they spoke. Dad didn't try to contact him again. I've spent the last 3 years researching what happened, reading every account I could find of similar experiences in that region. I never use the term out loud, but I know what people say we encountered that night. The descriptions match too perfectly to be coincidence. I still have the medicine pouch. I keep it in my bedside drawer, and I will never, ever visit the Navajo Nation again, especially not after dark. I've never told anyone the full story of what happened to me last October at Walker's Ridge. I've been a hunter all my life, started going out with my dad when I was 7, and he taught me everything I know about tracking, setting up camp, and respecting the wilderness. By the time I was 16, I could field dress a deer faster than most grown men in our area. It was just something that came naturally to me, something I loved. For the past 5 years, I've worked as a camp supervisor at Blackwater Recreation Area, which sits at the base of Walker's Ridge. It's a sweet gig. I maintain the grounds, help tourists who don't know a tent stake from a marshmallow stick, and in the off-season, I get permission to hunt on parts of the mountain that are closed to the public. I've spent so much time on that mountain that I know it like the back of my hand, or at least I thought I did. Last fall, I took my annual week off for hunting season. The weather forecast was perfect, cool but not cold, clear skies, and a full moon for the week. I loaded up my truck with my gear on Monday morning, my Winchester 30-06, camping equipment, enough food for 4 days, and my lucky orange cap that belonged to my grandpa. I had been looking forward to this trip for months after getting reports of a massive buck that some hikers had spotted in the Eastern Valley. I drove about halfway up the mountain access road and parked at my usual spot. From there, it was a 2-mile hike to my favorite clearing. The clearing sits in a little valley between 2 ridges, with a small stream running through it, perfect for setting up camp. I've used this spot for years and never had any issues, never even felt uncomfortable there. I reached the clearing around 2 p.m. and started setting up camp. That's when I first noticed something was off. While driving in tent stakes, I got this feeling, that crawling sensation on the back of your neck when you're being watched. I straightened up and scanned the tree line, expecting to see maybe a curious deer or even another hunter. Nothing, just trees swaying gently in the breeze. I shook it off and continued setting up. By 4 p.m., I had camp fully established, tent pitched, fire ring set up, gear organized. I decided to do a quick survey of the area before dark, so I grabbed my rifle and binoculars and headed toward the eastern ridge where that big buck had been spotted. I wasn't planning to hunt that evening, just wanted to check for signs and maybe set up a game camera. About a mile from camp, I found some fresh deer tracks. A whole herd had come through maybe a few hours earlier. I followed the tracks, moving quietly through the underbrush. The woods were oddly quiet. Normally you'd hear birds, squirrels, the whole orchestra of forest sounds, but that afternoon it was just the sound of my boots on the ground and the occasional breeze through the trees. I was working my way around a bend in the path when I heard crashing through the underbrush ahead. I raised my rifle instinctively, thinking I might get lucky with that buck on the first day. But what I saw made no sense. A group of about 6 deer were running, not away from me, but toward me, and not just moving in my direction, but full-on panicked running, the kind of sprint deer do when they're fleeing from a predator. When they saw me, they scattered in different directions, but they didn't run back the way they'd come. Whatever had spooked them was behind them, and they'd rather risk a human encounter than go back that way. I stood perfectly still, listening. Any hunter knows that when deer behave like that, there's usually a predator nearby, typically a mountain lion or maybe a bear. We have both in these mountains, and while neither usually bothers humans, I wasn't taking chances. I checked that my rifle was ready and waited. After a few minutes of silence, curiosity got the better of me. I decided to track back along the deer path, figuring I'd just take a quick look and then head back to camp before dark. I moved slowly, staying alert, scanning constantly for movement. About a quarter-mile back, I found it. A deer carcass, fresh killed, probably not even an hour old. It wasn't eaten, just torn open. The throat and chest cavity were ripped apart, but nothing had been consumed. That's not normal predator behavior. Mountain lions and bears kill to eat, not for sport. And the way it was torn up, it looked more like something had used hands, not claws or teeth. The precision of it was unsettling. While I was examining the carcass, a movement caught my eye about 50 yards away, something grayish moving between trees. It was too quick for me to get a good look, just a blur of motion. My first thought was maybe a coyote with mange, but it seemed bigger than that. I raised my rifle and peered through the scope, but whatever it was had disappeared. The sun was starting to get low, and a chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the temperature. I decided to head back to camp. That deer carcass and the way those other deer had been running had me spooked. I'm not ashamed to admit it. The walk back seemed longer than it should have. The shadows were getting deeper, and that feeling of being watched returned, stronger than before. Several times I stopped and turned quickly, convinced something was following me, but I never saw anything. I was about a quarter-mile from my camp when I saw it. The sun was setting, casting long shadows through the trees, and I happened to glance up at a large oak about 30 yards to my right. At first, my brain couldn't process what I was seeing. Clinging to the trunk about 15 feet up was something. It was humanoid in shape, but wrong in every way a thing could be wrong. Its skin was a grayish-blue color, almost like a corpse that had been in water. It was thin, emaciated even, but I could see muscle definition beneath that skin, like it was powerful despite its gaunt appearance. It was clinging to the tree with its limbs in a way no human could, fingers and toes dug into the bark. But it was the head that made my blood turn to ice. Its head was twitching, not like a nervous tick, but violent, unnatural jerks, like its neck was broken and it couldn't control the movement. As I stood frozen in shock, the twitching stopped abruptly, and its head rotated toward me with a fluidity that no human neck should have. Its eyes caught the last light of the setting sun and reflected it back. Not the red eye shine of a deer or the yellow of a bear, but a pale, milky reflection. Pure instinct took over. I raised my rifle and fired. I know I hit it. I saw the impact on what would be its shoulder. It made a sound then, a high-pitched shriek that sounded like a mix between a woman screaming and metal scraping on metal. Then it was gone, not running away, but just gone. 1 second it was there, the next it had dropped from the tree and vanished into the underbrush. My ears were ringing from the gunshot and that awful shriek, but I didn't hesitate. I ran the rest of the way back to camp, rifle ready, scanning constantly. The light was fading fast now, and I kept imagining that thing emerging from the shadows. When I reached the clearing, I stopped dead in my tracks. My campsite was destroyed. The tent was ripped open, supplies scattered everywhere. My backpack had been torn apart, food containers opened and contents strewn about, but the way it was done, it wasn't like a bear looking for food. It seemed methodical, deliberate, like someone had searched through everything I owned. I stood there trying to process what I was seeing when I felt it, that cold certainty that I wasn't alone. Slowly, I turned around. It was there, at the edge of the clearing, crouched on all fours like an animal, but so clearly not an animal. In the fading light, I could see it more clearly now. The bullet had torn its shoulder open, but there was no blood, just a dark, gaping wound. Its mouth, God, its mouth. The skin around it was torn, like its jaw had been ripped wider, and inside I could see rows of teeth that looked like shattered glass, jagged, translucent, razor sharp. Its eyes were milky white, no pupils that I could see, but somehow I knew it was looking right at me. For what felt like an eternity, we just stared at each other. Then it moved. The way it moved wasn't like anything I've ever seen, not like a person, not like an animal. It was almost like watching stop-motion animation, jerky and too fast and wrong. It covered the 20 yards between us in seconds. I managed to get off one wild shot before it slammed into me, knocking me flat on my back. My rifle went flying. The thing was on top of me, its weight pressing down, those claw-like fingers slashing at my chest and arms as I tried to protect my face. I could feel its hot breath as it snapped those teeth at my face, trying to get at my throat. I'm not a small guy. I'm 6'2", and have worked outdoors my whole life. Pure survival instinct gave me strength I didn't know I had. I managed to get my knee up between us and kicked with everything I had, sending it tumbling backward. I scrambled for my rifle, fingers closing around the barrel as the thing recovered and leaped again. I rolled onto my back, brought the rifle up, and fired directly into its face as it came down on me. The impact blew its head apart, but not like a normal creature. There was no blood, just a dark, viscous fluid that spattered across my face and chest. The smell was unbearable, like rotting meat and something chemical, like ammonia or bleach. The thing collapsed on top of me, and I shoved it off, gagging and spitting, trying to wipe that fluid from my face. The body twitched and convulsed on the ground beside me. I didn't wait to see what would happen next. I grabbed my keys from the remains of my pack, left everything else, and ran. I don't remember much about the run back to my truck. I know I fell several times. I know I kept looking back, convinced I was being followed. I kept seeing movement in the trees, kept hearing that scraping metallic sound. And the whole time, I had the overwhelming sense that there were eyes watching me. Not just one pair, but many, all around the mountain, tracking my desperate flight. When I reached my truck, I fumbled with the keys, hands shaking so badly I could barely get the door unlocked. I threw myself inside, locked the doors, and started the engine. As the headlights came on, I swear I saw shapes moving just beyond the beam of light, gray figures slipping between the trees. I drove down that mountain road at speeds that should have killed me, skidding around corners, bouncing over ruts. I didn't slow down until I hit the main highway, and even then, I didn't feel safe. I drove straight home, parked in my driveway, and sat there, engine running, for maybe an hour before I could make myself get out of the truck. When my parents saw me, they freaked out. I was covered in scratches, That dark fluid and dirt from falling so many times. I told them I'd been attacked by a bear. What else could I say? I couldn't explain what really happened because I still don't understand it myself. I quit my job at the campgrounds the next day, made up some excuse about wanting to be closer to town. I've been working at a hardware store since then, and I haven't been back to Walker's Ridge. I haven't been hunting at all. Sometimes at night, I still wake up hearing that metal-on-metal shriek. Sometimes I think I see something gray moving just at the edge of my vision. And sometimes when I'm alone, I could swear I feel eyes watching me. I was a hunter my whole life. Now I know what it feels like to be hunted. And whatever that thing was, whatever those things were, they weren't natural. They weren't animals. They weren't human. I don't know what they were, but I know they're still out there, on that mountain, and sometimes I can't shake the feeling they're just waiting for me to come back. I've been a park ranger for almost 10 years now, and I've seen a lot of weird stuff out in the woods. Animals acting strange, lost hikers with crazy stories, even the occasional grow operation hidden deep in the park. But what happened last month, I still can't wrap my head around it. I've barely slept since. I keep the lights on all night now. I jump at every sound. I haven't told many people about this, but I need to get it off my chest. It was during that slow period we always get between spring break and the summer vacation rush. The park gets really quiet, and we usually use this time to do maintenance and prep for the busy season. We were short-staffed because 2 of our senior rangers had just retired, and the new hires weren't starting until June. So it was just me and Alan covering the entire eastern section of the park. Alan was a good guy, mid-40s, divorced, been working at the park longer than me. He was the kind of ranger who knew every trail and could tell you what kind of bird was singing just by hearing a few notes. We weren't close friends or anything, but we had a good working relationship, respected each other. That day, I was stationed at the main entrance building, mostly doing paperwork and occasionally helping the few visitors who showed up. Alan was about 8 miles deeper in the park, manning the Bear Ridge Lookout Tower. It's one of those 60-foot fire towers with a small cabin at the top, gives you a view of almost the entire eastern section. We usually keep it staffed during fire season, but it's also useful for spotting lost hikers. The weather had been weird all day. Overcast but not really threatening rain. Just this heavy gray sky that never changed. The barometric pressure was dropping though. I could feel it in my sinuses. Around 7 p.m. I was finishing up my shift reports when Alan radioed in. "John, you copy?" His voice came through with that staticky crackle our outdated radios always have. "Yeah, I copy. What's up, Alan?" There was a pause, longer than normal. Then, "Can you come up to the tower? I need to show you something." I remember feeling annoyed at first. It was getting dark, and I was looking forward to heading home. "Can it wait until morning? I'm almost done here." Another pause. "No. I really think you should see this now." Something about his voice sounded off. Nervous, maybe. Alan wasn't the type to get spooked easily. In all our years working together, I'd never heard him sound like that. "Everything okay up there?" I asked. "Just come to the tower when you can. Please." I sighed, finished my reports, locked up the entrance building, and headed to my truck. The drive to Bear Ridge Tower takes about 25 minutes on the service road. It was almost completely dark by the time I started driving, just a faint grayish glow on the horizon. I remember the forest seemed unusually quiet. No owls, no night insects yet. Just the sound of my truck on the gravel road. When I pulled up to the tower, the first thing I noticed was that Alan's truck was parked at an odd angle, like he'd stopped suddenly. The driver's door was open, interior light still on. His jacket was on the ground next to it. I grabbed my flashlight and got out. "Alan!" I called up toward the tower. No response. As I walked toward the base of the tower, I noticed the ground was muddy. Really muddy. Which was strange because it hadn't rained in over a week. The mud was dark, almost black in my flashlight beam. It had a weird smell too. Not just earth, but something metallic and organic that made my nose wrinkle. I called out again. "Alan, you up there?" Still nothing. That's when I noticed the trail of mud leading away from the tower, toward the tree line about 50 yards away. Something had dragged through the mud, leaving a wide, irregular path. My first thought was maybe a bear had wandered through, but the pattern wasn't right for animal tracks. I followed the trail, my heart already beating faster. The mud got thicker as I approached the trees, and the smell got stronger. When my flashlight beam hit the edge of the forest, I saw it. Oh God, I still see it when I close my eyes. It was Alan, or what was left of him. His body was torn apart, literally shredded. His torso was ripped open, chunks of flesh scattered around him. His face was completely destroyed, unrecognizable. The only reason I knew it was him was the uniform. Our standard issue green pants and shirt, now soaked in blood that looked black in my flashlight beam. I stumbled backward and vomited. Then I pulled my radio with shaking hands. "Dispatch, this is Ranger Collins at Bear Ridge Tower. I have an emergency, officer down, possible animal attack. I need immediate assistance." My voice didn't even sound like my own. That's when my radio crackled again, but it wasn't dispatch responding. "John, are you coming up? I've been waiting." It was Alan's voice. I froze. I looked down at what was definitely Alan's corpse, then back at the tower looming against the night sky. My flashlight beam caught movement in the observation cabin window. A silhouette moved away from the glass. My blood turned to ice. I started backing toward my truck, never taking my eyes off the tower. The radio crackled again. "John, I see your truck. Come up and see this." Alan's voice, but wrong somehow. The inflection wasn't quite right, like someone trying to imitate him. I reached my truck and grabbed the shotgun we keep locked inside. As I fumbled with the keys to unlock the weapon box, I heard the distinctive creak of the tower stairs. Someone, or something, was coming down. I finally got the shotgun out and chambered around, pointing my flashlight toward the base of the tower. What I saw will haunt me for the rest of my life. It wasn't human. It looked vaguely humanoid in shape, 2 arms, 2 legs, a head, but everything was wrong. Its skin was a grayish color, not like any human skin tone I've ever seen. Its body was both muscular and somehow lanky at the same time, with limbs that seemed too long and jointed in places they shouldn't be. It moved in this jerky, unnatural way, like it wasn't used to its own body. But its face, Jesus, its face. The upper half almost looked human. Eyes set too far apart, no nose to speak of, just slits. But the lower half was just teeth, rows of them, some seemingly punching through the skin around what should have been its mouth. Some of the teeth looked human, others definitely didn't. It held something up to where its mouth should have been. My radio. It clicked the button, and Alan's voice came out again. "John, what's wrong? Come up and see this." I didn't think. I jumped in my truck, gunned the engine, and aimed straight at the thing. I felt the impact as I hit it, heard a sound that wasn't quite a scream and wasn't quite a roar. I didn't stop. I floored it all the way back to the main road, not even looking in my rearview mirror. I called in what happened from my truck, but I didn't tell them everything. How could I? I said there was an animal attack, that Alan was dead, and that I'd encountered what I thought was the attacker. Maybe a bear, maybe a mountain lion gone rabid. I couldn't bring myself to describe what I'd actually seen. The authorities found Alan's body exactly where I said it would be. They found blood on my truck's bumper and strange gray hairs stuck in the grill that they couldn't identify. They never found whatever I hit. The official report concluded it was a deranged human attacker who fled the scene. They cited some recent reports of a possible homeless encampment in the park, suggested maybe it was someone with severe mental illness. I know better. What I saw wasn't human. It wasn't an animal either, at least not any animal known to science. I quit my job the next day. I moved 4 states away. I work at a much smaller park now, but I refuse to work after sunset. I carry a gun at all times. I've spent hours researching what I might have encountered. Some Native American legends talk about creatures called wendigos that can mimic human voices to lure victims. There are internet stories about something called the rake, or skinwalkers, creatures that steal voices and appearances. I don't know what it was. I don't want to know. But I can't forget the sound of Alan's voice coming from that thing. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night thinking I hear my radio crackling, asking me to come see something. If you're ever hiking or camping, and you hear a familiar voice calling you from somewhere you can't quite see, please remember this. Never trust a voice when you can't see its face. Whatever I encountered that night understood how to use our human connections against us. It knew I would come if Alan called. It knew exactly what to say. I think about Alan sometimes. Did it kill him quickly? Did it make him suffer? Did it keep him alive long enough to learn his voice, his mannerisms, to ask the right questions that would bring me to the tower? The authorities found his vocal cords were missing from his body, just completely gone. I've started seeing a therapist, but I can't tell her everything. She thinks I'm suffering from PTSD after finding my colleague's body after an animal attack. She's not wrong, but it's so much worse than she knows. I check the locks on my doors and windows multiple times every night. I've installed motion-activated lights all around my new place. I sleep with my shotgun next to my bed, and still I don't feel safe. Sometimes, on particularly quiet nights, I swear I can hear something moving around outside my house. Something that doesn't move like a person or an animal should move. And sometimes I think I hear a voice that sounds almost, but not quite, like Alan's, calling my name from the darkness beyond my porch light. I don't answer anymore. I'll never answer a call like that again. I never believed in the supernatural before prison. Funny how 15 years in South Arizona State Penitentiary changed that. I got out 3 months ago, but I still wake up sweating, thinking I hear those wet footsteps racing past my bed. Some nights I check the locks twice, 3 times, convinced something's trying to squeeze through impossibly small spaces to get to me. It started with whispers. My first week inside, my cellmate Darren wouldn't shut up about the skinwalker. I figured it was just prison folklore, something to scare the new guys. Every prison has ghost stories. But the way the older inmates fell silent whenever it came up, that wasn't normal prison behavior. The incident happened about a year before I arrived. According to Darren, guards doing morning checks found a prisoner's cell occupied by someone who wasn't supposed to be there. The thing is, this unknown man was wearing the prisoner's skin, literally, like a suit. The original prisoner was just gone, vanished, and nobody could identify the imposter. Man never spoke, Darren told me, voice low, even though we were alone in our cell. Not one fucking word, just stared at the wall. They transferred him out after 2 weeks. No paperwork, no nothing, just disappeared one night. I laughed it off. Prison makes people crazy. Isolation does things to your mind. Then I met Carl. Carl was this ancient Navajo guy, must have been pushing 70. Doing life for something he never talked about. He kept to himself mostly. But when he heard some younger guys talking about the skinwalker, something changed in him. I was in the yard when he approached their table. "You don't know what you're talking about," he said, his voice cracking from disuse. "Real skinwalkers aren't just some ghost story." The table went quiet. Carl never spoke to anyone. "They learn to mimic human speech, but never get it quite right," he continued, eyes darting around like he was checking if anyone was listening too closely. "They twitch. Their walk isn't natural, but the masters, the grandmasters, they perfect it over years." One of the younger guys laughed. "So what? We got some monster running around wearing people like jackets?" Carl didn't laugh. "One's been here long before any of us arrived. It's perfecting its disguise, picking us off one by one, year after year." I didn't think much of it then. Just another old-timer who'd lost his mind after decades inside. But then I started noticing things, patterns. Every few months someone would snap. Not the usual prison snapping, not fights or suicide attempts. This was different. These guys would stop talking altogether. They'd hunch over, shuffle around with their hair hanging in their faces. Their movements became jerky, uncoordinated. Guards called it prison psychosis, but it didn't look like any mental breakdown I'd ever seen. And here's the weird part. Within weeks, these guys would get transferred. No warning, no paperwork that anyone ever saw. Just gone one morning, and nobody seemed to question it. The first time I saw it happen was about 8 months in. This guy Rodriguez, normal dude, kept his head down, had a wife and kids on the outside, started acting strange after coming back from the shower block one evening, stopped talking mid-sentence to his buddy, started walking funny, like his joints weren't working right. 3 days later, he wouldn't respond to his name during count, just stared at the floor, breathing heavy, making these small twitching movements. A week after that, he was gone. Transferred, they said. No one asked questions. It was around then I started noticing the nighttime noises. Prison is never quiet, but these sounds were different. They'd start around 2 a.m., this echoing noise like a dying pig mixed with fingernails on a chalkboard. The first time I heard it, I bolted upright in my bunk, heart pounding. Darren was awake too, eyes wide in the darkness. "The fuck was that?" I whispered. He just shook his head, pulled his blanket higher. The shadows were next. You'd be lying in your bunk, and suddenly a shadow would cross your wall, but there was nothing there to cast it. No one walking past, no birds flying outside the window, just this dark shape sliding across the concrete. But the footsteps, those were the worst. They started in my 3rd year, wet slapping sounds like someone running on the tile floor with soaking wet feet, but fast, impossibly fast. They'd race from one end of the cell block to the other in seconds, faster than any human could run, and always when the guards weren't around. The first time I heard them, I jumped to the bars to look. Nothing, just the empty corridor. But the sound had definitely been real. Half the block was up, staring out through their bars just like me. "Don't look," came a whisper from the cell across from mine. It was Carl, the old Navajo. "If you see it moving, it sees you watching." After that night, the footsteps became more frequent, always between 2 and 4 a.m., always that same wet slapping sound, racing back and forth. Some nights they'd stop abruptly outside a particular cell. Those were the worst nights, because within days, whoever lived in that cell would start to change. Stop talking, start shuffling, then disappear. By year 5, I was convinced something was happening in that prison that couldn't be explained. I tried talking to a guard once, Stevens, one of the decent ones. Asked him about the transfers, about the footsteps. "You hearing things, inmate?" he said, but his eyes wouldn't meet mine. "Maybe you need to see the prison shrink." I never brought it up again. In year 7, Carl started speaking to me more. Not much, just warnings mostly. He'd been inside for 30 years and had watched it all happen. "It's patient," he told me one day in the yard, his voice so low I had to lean in. "Been here longer than the prison itself. The land knows it. My people knew to avoid this place." "What does it want?" I asked. "To perfect its mimicry, to walk among humans undetected." His eyes darted around the yard. "It's been practicing for decades, getting better. The ones who disappear, they're its practice runs." "But someone would notice people going missing," I argued. "Family members, friends." Carl shook his head. "Prison's perfect. Nobody cares about missing inmates. Papers get lost. Records get misplaced. And who's counting the bodies when they ship them out? You think anyone checks those bags?" That conversation haunted me for months. I started studying everyone. Guards, inmates, looking for signs. Unnatural movements. Speech patterns that seemed off. But everyone looks strange in prison. Everyone develops tics, weird habits, unusual gaits. It was impossible to tell. As the years passed, the incidents continued. Every few months, someone would snap, then disappear. The footsteps grew more frequent. Sometimes they'd be accompanied by a smell, like wet leather left in the sun, mixed with something metallic. Blood, maybe, or something worse. In year 12, Darren was transferred to another cell block. My new cellmate was a young guy named Martinez, in for armed robbery. He listened to my warnings about the skinwalker with wide eyes, but I could tell he thought I was just another prison crazy. Until the night we both woke to find a face pressed against our cell bars from the outside. Not a face, really. More like the suggestion of one, features shifting and rearranging in the darkness. We froze, neither of us breathing, as it examined us. Then it was gone. After that, Martinez became a believer. The incident with Martinez happened a week before my release date. I'd been counting down the days. 15 years is a long time, but I'd made it. Just 7 more days and I'd be out, away from the wet footsteps and the disappearances and the faces in the darkness. Then Martinez started acting strange, stopped talking mid-sentence during dinner, started shuffling when he walked. I knew the signs by now, had seen them dozens of times. But this was different. This was my cellmate, the guy who slept 4 feet away from me. I didn't sleep that night, just lay in my bunk watching him twitch in his sleep. Around 2 a.m., the footsteps started, racing up and down the corridor as always. But this time, they stopped outside our cell. There was that smell again, wet leather and metal. Martinez's eyes snapped open, but they weren't his eyes anymore. Too wide, too empty. He sat up rigidly, head turning to look at me with jerky movements. His mouth opened, but the sound that came out wasn't human speech. It was like someone trying to mimic words they'd heard but didn't understand. All wrong cadence and misplaced emphasis. "Sleep now, you, sleep now." I shut my eyes, heart hammering so loud I was sure it could hear it. The wet footsteps started again, racing away. When I dared to look, Martinez was standing by the bars, perfectly still. Then impossibly he began to squeeze through them. Not between them. There wasn't enough space. But somehow through them, like his body was compressing, bones cracking softly as he pushed himself into the corridor. I must have passed out from fear, because the next thing I remember is morning count. Martinez was back in his bunk, acting normal again. He even talked to me at breakfast, but something was off. His words didn't sound right, like someone had taught him English phonetically. For the next 6 days, I didn't sleep. Couldn't. Martinez would disappear at night, somehow squeezing through those bars, and return before dawn. Each day, he became less convincing as a human. His movements were wrong. His skin looked loose somehow, especially around the face. On my last night, I heard Carl's voice from across the corridor. "It knows you've seen," he whispered. "Be careful on the outside. They don't all stay in here." The next morning was my release day. I was processed out in a daze, given my personal effects and $200 in gate money. As I walked along the fence toward the parking lot where my sister would pick me up, I took one last look at the prison yard. There was Carl, standing alone by the basketball court. But he wasn't standing straight anymore. He was hunched over, head twitching manically from side to side. His movements were jerky, uncoordinated. Our eyes met across the yard, and the thing wearing Carl's face smiled. Its mouth opened too wide, stretching beyond what a human jaw should allow. And I knew then that the skinwalker had finally claimed the one person who truly understood what it was. I've been out 3 months now. Sometimes at night I hear wet footsteps in my apartment hallway. Sometimes I catch glimpses of familiar faces in crowds, faces of inmates I know were transferred years ago, faces that don't move quite right. And sometimes I wonder if the real Martinez ever made it out of that prison, or if what walked out wearing his skin is still out there, learning, practicing, perfecting its disguise. I've been debating whether to share this for months now. I'm not looking for explanations or suggestions. Honestly, I just need to get this off my chest because it's been eating me up inside. I still have nightmares about it, and talking to friends hasn't helped because they either think I was on something or just try to rationalize what happened. You can't rationalize this. Trust me, I've tried. Back in January, I quit my marketing job in Seattle. The stress was killing me, and I was in a really bad place mentally. My dad had committed suicide about 6 months earlier, and I was still processing that whole mess. We weren't close in the last few years, typical father-son stuff that feels so stupid now, but his death hit me harder than I expected. He left me his cabin in Oregon, this place about 25 miles outside of Bend, in a pretty isolated area. Beautiful spot surrounded by pine forest, backing up to national forest land. I decided to go stay there for a couple weeks to clear my head before looking for another job. The cabin was going to be sold at the end of February. My dad had massive debt I couldn't afford to take on, so this was basically my last chance to spend time there. I packed up my Subaru with supplies, grabbed my dog Midnight, a big black lab mix, and headed down. The drive was uneventful. It was snowing lightly when I arrived, with about a foot of powder already on the ground. The cabin itself is nothing fancy but comfortable. 2 stories with a main living area and kitchen downstairs, 2 bedrooms and a bathroom upstairs. There's a small covered porch in front and a balcony off the main bedroom that overlooks the backyard and the forest beyond. The nearest neighbor is about half a mile away, and you can barely see their place through the trees when there aren't any leaves. The first couple days were exactly what I needed. I did some snowboarding, took Midnight for long walks, cooked some decent meals. At night I'd play video games, have a few beers, and just chill. The cabin was warm, Midnight was happy, and for the first time since my dad died, I felt somewhat at peace. I even found myself looking through some of his old stuff in the closets, which I hadn't been able to do at the funeral. It was on the 3rd day that things started getting weird. I took Midnight out for his morning bathroom break around 8 a.m. We'd gotten another few inches of snow overnight, and everything was pristine white. Except it wasn't completely pristine. There were footprints all around the perimeter of the cabin. They looked human, but something was off about them. They were spaced weirdly far apart, like whoever made them had an unusually long stride. At first, I thought maybe it was the property manager checking on things. But why would anyone walk all the way around the cabin instead of just coming to the door? And there was no car parked anywhere nearby. The footprints led into the forest behind the cabin. I followed them for maybe 20 yards before getting a weird feeling in my gut. Midnight was acting strange too. Usually he loves running through fresh snow, but he was sticking close to my legs and kept looking back toward the cabin. I decided to head back, telling myself it was probably just a hiker who got curious about the place. Throughout the day, I couldn't shake a feeling of being watched. I'd catch myself staring out the windows into the trees, looking for movement. But the forest was still, just occasional snow falling from overloaded branches. I brushed it off as paranoia from being alone in a remote place and tried to focus on enjoying my day. That night is when things got truly terrifying. Around 10 p.m., I was on the couch watching Netflix when Midnight suddenly jumped up and ran to the back door. He started whining and pawing at it, which was unlike him. I figured he needed to pee, so I grabbed my coat and opened the door. Instead of running out to do his business, he just stood on the porch, hackles raised, staring into the darkness. "What's up, buddy?" I said, peering into the night. The motion sensor light had clicked on, illuminating the immediate area around the porch, but beyond that was pitch black. I couldn't see anything unusual, but Midnight was fixated on something. After a minute, he reluctantly did his business near the steps, then bolted back inside. I followed, feeling uneasy. For the next hour, Midnight was on edge. He kept going from window to window, staring out with his ears perked up. He'd occasionally growl low in his throat, something I'd rarely heard him do before. I tried to distract him with treats and toys, but he wasn't having it. Around midnight, I decided to try to get some sleep. I went upstairs to the main bedroom, Midnight following close behind. I had just gotten under the covers when I heard it, a soft thump on the roof, like someone had stepped on it. I froze, listening intently. Maybe it was just snow falling. Then I heard another thump and another, rhythmic, like footsteps. They moved slowly across the roof, directly over my head. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Midnight was standing at the foot of the bed, staring at the ceiling, his whole body rigid. The footsteps stopped right above me. There was a pause, and then a scratching sound, like nails or claws dragging across the shingles. "Fuck this," I whispered, grabbing my phone and turning on the flashlight. I slid out of bed and moved to the balcony door. The rational part of my brain was saying it could be a raccoon or maybe a branch scraping the roof, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. I slowly opened the balcony door, Midnight crowding against my legs. The bitter cold hit me immediately. I stepped out, shining my light up toward the roof. Nothing. The footsteps had stopped. I scanned the roofline with my light, but saw no animal, no loose branch, nothing that could explain the sounds. As I lowered my light, letting my eyes adjust to the darkness, that's when I saw it. In a large pine tree about 20 feet from the balcony, there was something. At first, my brain couldn't process what I was seeing. It looked like a person, but wrong. It was perched between two branches, about 15 feet up in the tree, practically at eye level with the balcony. It was tall, impossibly tall. Even crouched as it was, I could tell it would stand at least 8 or 9 feet. Its limbs were unnaturally long and thin, almost skeletal, with ghostly white skin that seemed to glow faintly in the moonlight. Its arms were wrapped around the tree trunk, fingers splayed out like spider legs, each digit far too long. But its face, Jesus Christ, its face. It had a human-like face, but stretched and distorted. Its mouth was open in what I can only describe as a grin, but too wide, extending almost to where ears should be. And its eyes, large, round, and completely fixed on me. Not just looking in my direction, but looking directly at me, making eye contact. I stood there paralyzed for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only seconds. Midnight was growling beside me, the hair on his back standing straight up. The thing in the tree didn't move, didn't blink, just stared with that horrific grin. Then it tilted its head, like a curious dog, and I broke. I stumbled backward into the bedroom, dragging Midnight with me, and slammed the balcony door shut. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely lock it. I yanked the curtains closed and backed away, tripping over my own feet and landing hard on the floor. I crawled to my bed and grabbed my phone, frantically trying to decide who to call. The police? What would I tell them? There's a monster in a tree outside my cabin? They'd think I was on drugs or having a psychotic break. While I was panicking, Midnight had positioned himself in front of the balcony door, growling continuously. I noticed he wasn't looking at the door itself, but up toward the ceiling. The footsteps had started again, moving from the other side of the roof toward the balcony. Then they stopped, and there was silence for maybe 30 seconds. That's when the tapping started. Gentle at first, barely audible. Tap, tap, tap. On the screen of the balcony door, like a fingernail against mesh. Tap, tap, tap. It continued, steady and patient. I was huddled against the headboard of the bed, clutching my phone, too terrified to move. Midnight had stopped growling and was now making a high-pitched whining sound that made the hair on my arms stand up. The tapping went on for nearly an hour. Sometimes it would stop for a minute or two, and I'd think maybe whatever it was had gone away. Then it would start again, sometimes faster, sometimes slower, but always persistent. The worst part was that as my initial terror began to fade, I started feeling something else, a strange compulsion to open the door. It was like an itch in my brain, a whisper suggesting that I should see what was out there, that I should let it in. I found myself staring at the door handle, my body wanting to get up and move toward it. That's when I heard my dad's voice, clear as day, like he was standing right next to the bed. "Stay put, son. Don't you dare open that door." I nearly jumped out of my skin. I whipped my head around, but of course no one was there. I don't believe in ghosts, but in that moment, I was certain my father had somehow reached out to warn me. The tapping stopped abruptly. There was a scraping sound on the roof, and then silence. I didn't sleep at all that night. I kept the lights on and sat there with Midnight, both of us staring at the balcony door. I had my hunting knife in one hand and my phone in the other, ready to call 911 if the thing somehow got in. Nothing else happened that night, but I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that had settled over me. When the first light of dawn finally came through the edges of the curtains, I nearly cried with relief. I didn't even wait to have breakfast. I threw my stuff into my bags, not caring if I left something behind. Midnight seemed just as eager to leave, pacing by the front door while I loaded the car. As I was putting the last bag in the trunk, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. There were more footprints in the fresh snow, the same odd, long-strided prints from yesterday. They circled the cabin, but this time they also went right up to each window, like whatever made them had been looking in at me all night. And there, in the snow beneath the balcony, was a clear impression. Not footprints, but a body print, as if something had jumped or fallen from the roof and landed there. From that spot, a single set of those unnatural footprints led straight into the forest. I grabbed Midnight, jumped in my car, and got the hell out of there. I called the property manager from the road and told him I was done with the place, that he could go ahead and show it to buyers. I made up some excuse about a job opportunity I couldn't pass up. I've never gone back, and I never will. I've tried researching what I saw, looking into local legends or similar encounters in that area, but nothing quite matches. Sometimes I still dream about that thing's face, that impossibly wide grin, and I wake up with a sensation of being watched. Whatever is in those Oregon woods, it isn't natural, and sometimes, late at night when I'm alone, I swear I can hear tapping on my apartment window. I've never told anyone about this before. Not fully, anyway. My roommate at the time knew I was shaken up about something, but I brushed it off as just a weird encounter with a drunk guy. It was so much worse than that. This happened about 3 years ago when I was living in Chicago. I've always been a night owl, and after my roommate would go to bed, I'd often get restless sitting in my apartment. So I started taking these long walks around the city, usually between midnight and 3 a.m. I know it sounds sketchy, but Chicago's downtown can be eerily peaceful at night, and I'd been doing it for almost 4 years without any problems. The city has always felt safe to me during these walks. There are usually enough people around, other insomniacs, late shift workers, couples coming home from dates, that I never felt threatened. Plus, I'm a pretty big guy, about 6'2", so people generally don't mess with me. But this one Wednesday night changed everything. It was between 1 and 2 a.m., and I was taking my usual route through the loop past this patrol park. It was a clear night, not too cold, and I remember feeling particularly relaxed. I had my headphones on, but wasn't actually playing any music, just a habit I got into so people wouldn't try to talk to me. I was approaching the end of a pretty quiet stretch of road when I noticed someone about a block ahead of me. Even from a distance, something seemed off about the way this person was moving. It's hard to describe, but it wasn't a normal walk. It was like some kind of bizarre skip step, almost like dancing, but not in any style I recognized. At first, I just figured it was some drunk dude doing drunk dude things. It was the middle of the week, but, people have their reasons. As we got closer to each other, I moved closer to the edge of the sidewalk to give him plenty of room to pass. That's when I started to realize this wasn't a normal drunk guy situation. This man was tall, maybe even taller than me, and really thin, like unnaturally thin. He was wearing a business suit that looked expensive, but fit him oddly, like it was a size too big. His movements weren't sloppy like you'd expect from someone intoxicated. They were precise, almost calculated, but completely bizarre. He would take these exaggerated steps sideways, then forward, then do this weird twirl that didn't match any normal human movement pattern. But his face... God, his face is what still keeps me up at night sometimes. His head was tilted back so he was looking up at the sky, but his eyes, they were wide open, impossibly wide, like someone had propped them open, and his mouth was stretched into this smile that went almost from ear to ear. It wasn't a happy smile. It wasn't even an insane smile. It was just wrong, like someone who had seen a smile once and was trying to replicate it without understanding what it was. I felt my heart rate pick up immediately. Every instinct was screaming that something was very, very wrong with this person. As we got within about 20 feet of each other, I decided to cross the street. I didn't want to seem panicked, so I tried to make it look casual, like I just happened to need to be on the other side. When I reached the opposite sidewalk, I glanced back, and the man had completely stopped moving. He was just standing there, perfectly still, directly parallel to me across the street, still looking up at the sky with that horrible smile. But somehow, I knew he was aware of me. I quickened my pace without trying to look like I was running. After about half a block, I looked back over my shoulder to see if he was following me. In that split second when I turned my head, he vanished. He was just gone. My blood went cold. I scanned the street frantically, trying to figure out where he could have gone so quickly. There weren't any alleys or doorways nearby. He would have had to sprint to get out of sight that fast. I was about to breathe a sigh of relief when I caught movement in my peripheral vision. The smiling man was now on my side of the street, maybe 50 feet ahead of me. He was crouched down in this unnatural position, almost like a frog, but with his legs bent at weird angles, and he was still smiling up at the sky. In that moment, I completely froze. I didn't know whether to run back the way I came or try to somehow get past him. Before I could decide, he started moving toward me with these exaggerated cartoon-like tiptoe steps. I know how ridiculous that sounds, but that's exactly what it looked like a cartoon character trying to sneak up on someone. Except it wasn't funny. It was terrifying because despite the silly movement, he was covering ground really quickly. I couldn't move. I literally could not make my legs work. All I managed to do was make this pathetic whimpering sound and say, "What do you want?" My voice cracked like I was going through puberty again. The smiling man didn't answer. He stopped moving about 10 feet away from me, and for a terrible moment, we just stood there. Me, paralyzed with fear, and him, grinning at the sky. Then, very slowly, he turned around and started doing that dance walk in the opposite direction. Relief washed over me for about 3 seconds. Then, without any warning, he stopped, spun around, and started sprinting directly at me. Not the weird dancing anymore. A full-on, athletic sprint. Somehow this broke my paralysis. I turned and ran faster than I've ever run in my life. I wasn't thinking about direction, just getting away. I ended up on a busier street with some traffic and a few people around. I looked back, and the smiling man was gone again. I didn't stop running until I reached my apartment building. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely get my key in the door. Once inside, I locked and chained the door, then pulled a chair against it for good measure. My roommate found me the next morning still sitting in the living room with all the lights on. I told him I'd had too much coffee and couldn't sleep. I couldn't bring myself to explain what had really happened. How do you tell someone you were terrorized by a man who smiled at the sky? I lived in Chicago for another 6 months after that, and I never went for another night walk, not once. I would literally sit in my apartment feeling like I was going to crawl out of my skin rather than go outside after dark. When I did have to be out at night, I took Ubers everywhere, even for short distances. The thing that haunts me the most about the encounter is that I don't think that man was drunk or high. I've seen plenty of people messed up on various substances. This was different. The precision in his movements, the way he seemed to be playing with me. It wasn't chemical impairment. It was something else entirely. When I think about his face, that horrible stretched smile and those wide eyes staring upward, what I remember seeing wasn't intoxication. It was something that looked like pure, concentrated insanity. I've moved to another city since then, and sometimes I think about trying to reclaim my night walks. But every time I consider it, I see that face in my mind, and I just can't. The worst part is not knowing who or what he was, what he wanted, or if he's still out there, doing that dance walk down empty streets, waiting for someone else to cross his path. Sometimes when I'm falling asleep, I imagine him standing outside my window, still staring at the sky with that inhuman smile, and I wonder if one night I'll look out and actually see him there. I've tried researching similar encounters online, thinking maybe this is some known phenomenon or perhaps a person with a specific mental illness that causes this behavior. I've found nothing. No explanation, no similar stories, nothing that helps me make sense of what happened that night. I still don't walk anywhere alone after dark. I don't think I ever will again, because the truth is, I'm not convinced that what I encountered that night was entirely human, and I never want to find out for sure. I've spent weeks debating whether to write this down. Even typing this makes my hands shake. I'm not superstitious, never believed in the paranormal, but what happened that night changed everything. I need to get this off my chest, even though part of me is terrified that just talking about it might bring it back. It happened about 3 months ago. My boyfriend Jake and I had gotten into this massive argument. One of those stupid fights that escalates way beyond what it should have. We'd been having problems for months, and that night everything just exploded. I don't even remember what started it, just that it ended with me grabbing my purse and slamming the door behind me. It was around 10:30 p.m. when I left the house. My son works the night shift at the hospital about 3 miles from our place, and I decided I'd walk there. Yeah, walking 3 miles in the middle of the night probably wasn't the smartest idea, but I was too angry to think straight. I just needed to get away, clear my head, and maybe see a friendly face. There are 2 ways to get to the hospital from our house. You can take the main highway, which is longer but well lit, or you can cut through what locals call the Old Miller Road. The Miller Road is this narrow path that winds through some woods and passes by the abandoned Miller house, this decrepit Victorian that's supposedly haunted. People around here also talk about something they call the monkey bear that supposedly roams that area at night. It's this local legend, something between a monkey and a bear that walks upright. I always laughed at those stories. That night, I chose Miller Road. It was shorter, and honestly, I just wasn't thinking clearly. I figured I'd be at the hospital in 45 minutes tops if I walked fast. The first part of the road wasn't so bad. There were a few street lights spaced far apart, and the occasional car would drive by, briefly illuminating the path ahead. To keep myself calm, I started singing under my breath. Just random songs, anything to fill the silence and take my mind off how dark it was getting as I moved farther from town. My phone was at 15% battery, so I was trying to save it in case of an emergency, using the flashlight function only when the road got really dark. About 20 minutes in, the streetlights ended completely. The road narrowed, with thick woods on either side. The moon was bright enough that I could see the outline of the path, but not much else. That's when I first heard it, footsteps on the gravel behind me. A slow, steady crunching sound. I stopped singing immediately and froze, listening hard. The footsteps stopped too. I told myself it was just an echo of my own steps, or maybe some small animal in the underbrush. I turned around, peering into the darkness, but couldn't see anything. "Hello?" I called out, immediately regretting it. My voice sounded so small in the darkness. No answer, just crickets and the distant sound of a car on the highway. I started walking again, faster this time. The footsteps resumed too, perfectly matching my pace but always staying the same distance behind me. When I slowed down, they slowed. When I sped up, they sped up. A car approached from behind, its headlights sweeping over the road. I turned around quickly, hoping to catch sight of whatever was following me, but there was nothing there, just empty road. But the moment the car passed and darkness fell again, the footsteps continued. I was getting close to the old Miller house now, a dilapidated structure set back from the road. The locals say a family was murdered there in the 70s, and no one's lived in it since. As I passed by, I swear the temperature dropped about 10 degrees. I'm not making this up. I could see my breath suddenly fogging in front of me, even though it was a mild spring night. The footsteps behind me got louder, more deliberate. I was full-on power walking by this point, clutching my purse to my chest like some kind of shield. I tried telling myself that fear was making me imagine things, but deep down, I knew something was there. I reached the bridge that crosses over Wilson Creek. It's this small concrete bridge with tall grass and reeds on either side. As I stepped onto it, I heard something different. Not footsteps on gravel anymore, but something moving through the grass alongside the bridge. Something big, pushing through the reeds, keeping pace with me. That's when I broke into a run. Whatever was in the grass started running too. I could hear it splashing through the shallow water, moving faster than I was. I was in full panic mode, sprinting across the bridge, when headlights appeared ahead of me. A car was coming toward me from the direction of the hospital. I've never been so happy to see headlights in my life. I waved my arms frantically, and to my surprise, the car slowed down. It was an older model pickup truck, dark blue or black. I couldn't tell in the darkness. It drove past me, then stopped and reversed until it was beside me. The passenger window rolled down, revealing 3 Native American individuals inside. A man was in the passenger seat, a woman driving, and another man in the back seat. The guy in the passenger seat leaned toward the window. "Need a ride?" he asked, his face expressionless. Under normal circumstances, I would never get into a car with strangers at night. But these weren't normal circumstances. Plus, there was something about the guy in the back seat that made my decision for me. He was staring at me with the most terrified expression I've ever seen on another human being. "Get in," he said urgently, his voice barely above a whisper. "Please get in now." I hesitated for just a second, looking back over my shoulder at the darkness behind me. The passenger threw open his door. "Now," he said, not yelling but with such intensity that I immediately moved. I climbed into the back seat next to the scared man, who immediately scooted over to make room. As soon as the door closed, the woman hit the gas hard, tires spinning on the gravel before finding purchase. The atmosphere in the car was tense. Nobody spoke for what felt like forever. The man in the front passenger seat pulled out a pack of cigarettes, lit one, then did something strange. He blew smoke into his hands and then rubbed the smoke over his face, arms, and chest. Then he passed the cigarette to the back seat guy, who did the same thing. When he offered it to me, I shook my head. "You should," the driver said, the first words she'd spoken. "It'll help." "Help with what?" I asked, my voice shaky. Nobody answered directly. The front passenger just kept looking out his side window, back toward where they'd picked me up. "What were you doing out there alone?" the backseat guy finally asked me. His voice was calmer now, but I could see his hands trembling. "Walking to the hospital. My son works there," I replied. Did you see something back there?" The 3 exchanged glances. The woman's eyes met mine in the rear-view mirror, then quickly looked away. "It was following you," the front passenger said matter-of-factly. "For how long, I don't know, but it was right behind you when we saw you." My blood ran cold. What was following me? More silence. The driver accelerated even faster, the speedometer pushing 70 on a road marked for 35. "We don't talk about them directly," the backseat man said quietly. "It's better not to name them or acknowledge them too much. They notice when you do." "But what did you see?" I insisted, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The front passenger turned around to face me. "It was standing upright when we first saw it, tall. Then, when our headlights hit it, it dropped down on all fours. It's not something from around here." I felt sick. The car was speeding now, the hospital getting closer. The back seat guy took my hand suddenly. His palm was ice cold. "Don't look for it when you get home. Don't talk about it. Don't think about it if you can help it." When we reached the hospital entrance, the driver pulled over abruptly. "This is your stop," she said, still not looking at me directly. As I reached for the door handle, the front passenger spoke again. "It had silver eyes," he said quietly. When it got down on all fours, it turned its head toward our car. And it smiled. The back seat man squeezed my hand once before letting go. "Remember what I said. Don't acknowledge it. These things, they feed on attention." I thanked them and got out, watching as they drove away quickly. My son was surprised to see me when I found him in the hospital cafeteria, but I couldn't tell him why I was so shaken. I just said Jake and I had fought, and I needed to see a friendly face. My son's supervisor let him take an early lunch, and we sat in the cafeteria while I tried to calm down. I kept looking out the windows into the darkness, expecting to see silver eyes staring back at me. After about an hour, one of his co-workers offered to drive me home when their shift ended at 2 a.m. I accepted immediately. When I got home, the house was dark. Jake had either gone to bed or left. I didn't care which at that point. Our dog, Buddy, was acting strange, pacing around, whining, refusing to settle down. This was weird because Buddy is the laziest golden retriever you'll ever meet. Nothing bothers that dog. I took a hot shower, trying to wash away the fear, then crawled into bed with Buddy on the floor beside me. I must have dozed off eventually because I woke up around 4 a.m. to Buddy growling, a sound I'd never heard him make before. He was standing at the bedroom door, hackles raised, staring down the hallway toward the front of the house. The growl wasn't the typical, "there's a squirrel outside" grumble. This was deep, threatening, and scared. I've had Buddy for 8 years and never heard him make that sound. I grabbed my phone to use as a flashlight and followed him into the hallway. He stalked forward, still growling, until we reached the front door. Then he just went crazy, barking, snarling, scratching at the door like he was trying to dig through it. I was terrified, but felt like I needed to check. What if it was Jake outside? Or what if someone was trying to break in? I flipped on the porch light and looked through the peephole. Nothing there. Against my better judgment, I cracked the door open, keeping the chain on. The moment I did, Buddy forced his way through the gap, bolting into the front yard, barking furiously at something in the driveway. That's when I saw it, just for a split second, a grayish-black figure, taller than a person should be, standing perfectly still by Jake's car. It wasn't clearly defined, more like a smudge against the night, but I could tell it was looking at me. When I blinked and focused directly on it, it was gone. Buddy continued barking at empty air, running in circles around the spot where I'd seen the figure. I called him inside, slammed the door, and double-locked it. I pushed the couch in front of the door for good measure and sat there with all the lights on until sunrise, Buddy trembling beside me the whole time. Jake came home the next morning, and we made up. I never told him what happened. I never told anyone until now. The Native Americans in the truck were right. Some things shouldn't be acknowledged or discussed. Some things notice when you pay attention to them. It's been 3 months and nothing else has happened. But sometimes, when I'm alone in the house, I'll hear what sounds like footsteps on the gravel driveway. And Buddy still occasionally stands at the front door, hackles raised, staring out at nothing I can see. I don't walk anywhere at night anymore. And I never, ever take Miller Road. Some things are better left alone, and some roads are better left untraveled. I just hope writing this doesn't bring its attention back to me. I never told anyone this story until now. I can't sleep. It's been almost 2 weeks since it happened, and I still wake up screaming every night. Writing it down might help me process what I saw, what I experienced. I don't expect anyone to believe me. I barely believe it myself. For the past 4 years, my Uncle Rick and I would drive up to Michigan's Upper Peninsula for a week-long hunting trip around Thanksgiving. It was our tradition. No phones, no work, just us, the woods, and the hunt. I wasn't crazy about hunting at first, but Rick taught me everything: tracking, patience, respecting nature, all of it. Last year, I finally shot my first buck, and I was actually looking forward to this year's trip. But 3 weeks ago, Rick called saying he couldn't make it. His contracting business landed a huge job that would keep him tied up through December. I was disappointed, but understood. Then I had this stupid idea: why not go alone? I'd learned enough from Rick, had all the gear, and honestly, I needed the break from work. Looking back, I wish I'd just stayed home and ordered a damn pizza. I packed up my Ford Ranger last Thursday morning. Rifle, ammo, tent, enough food for 5 days, first aid kit, the works. The drive from Chicago took about 7 hours, and I reached the Hiawatha National Forest by mid-afternoon. Rick and I usually hunted near Munising, but I wanted to try a different spot this time. At the last gas station before heading into the deeper wilderness, I asked the clerk about good hunting grounds. "Lots of deer up near Beaver Lake," he said, drawing a circle on my map. "Not many hunters go there this time of year. Too remote. Might get lucky." That sounded perfect. I thanked him, grabbed some beef jerky and coffee, and headed out. The roads got rougher the farther I drove, eventually turning to dirt tracks barely visible through the early snow. The temperature dropped fast as the sun began to set. I pushed on another hour before finding a small clearing that looked suitable for setting up camp. I pitched my tent, organized my gear, and ate a quick dinner of canned chili, heated over a small campfire. The silence was different without Rick's stories and jokes. Just the wind through the bare trees and occasional far-off animal sounds. I checked my phone, no service as expected. I set my alarm for 4:30 a.m. and crawled into my sleeping bag. The next morning was cold but clear. I dressed in layers, grabbed my rifle, and hiked about 2 miles northeast of camp. The forest was dense, tall pines and old-growth hardwoods, plenty of underbrush for deer to hide in. I found a promising spot with good sight lines and settled in for the wait. Hours passed. Nothing. I saw tracks, but no deer. Around noon, I decided to explore a bit further east. That's when I first spotted the cabin. It was small, maybe 15 by 20 feet, tucked between 2 massive pine trees, about half a mile from where I'd been sitting. The place looked old, but not abandoned, solid log construction with a metal roof. No vehicles nearby, no smoke from the chimney. I figured it belonged to another hunter, or maybe was an old ranger station. I made a mental note of its location and continued hunting. By late afternoon, dark clouds started rolling in from the northwest. The temperature dropped sharply and the wind picked up. I hadn't expected a storm. The forecast had called for cold but clear conditions all weekend. Within an hour, heavy snow was falling, and visibility dropped to maybe 20 feet. I knew I needed to get back to camp fast. I tried retracing my steps, but the snow was already covering my tracks. The wind became fierce, whipping ice crystals against my face. I couldn't see my compass clearly, and the darkening sky made everything worse. After stumbling around for what felt like forever, I realized I was completely turned around. That's when I remembered the cabin. If I could find it, I could at least get out of the storm until things cleared. I had a general idea of its direction and started pushing that way, keeping the wind at my left shoulder. My fingers were going numb despite my gloves, and my face burned from the cold. It was pure luck that I found it again. The cabin materialized out of the white haze like some mirage. Relief flooded through me as I approached the door. I knocked loudly, calling out to see if anyone was inside. No answer. I knocked again, waited, then tried the door. It wasn't locked. "Hello? Anyone here?" I called out as I stepped inside. The interior was dim but warmer than outside. A wood stove sat in one corner, glowing faintly with embers. Someone had been here recently. I closed the door behind me, shutting out the howling wind. My eyes adjusted to the low light. The cabin was sparse but cozy. A small table with 2 chairs, a counter with some cooking supplies, a single bed against the far wall, and a rocking chair near the stove. No electricity from what I could tell, just a few oil lamps on shelves. "Hello?" I called again, even checking under the bed to make sure I wasn't intruding on someone sleeping. Nothing. I figured the owner had gone out hunting and would return soon. I added a log to the stove from a stack beside it and sat in the rocking chair, warming my frozen hands. The storm was getting worse outside, snow piling against the single window. I decided I'd wait a while, and if no one showed up, I'd leave a note explaining why I'd entered and that I'd replaced any firewood I used. On the table sat a clay jug with no label. Curious, I uncorked it and sniffed. Red wine, homemade by the smell of it. I hesitated, then thought, what the hell? The owner probably wouldn't mind if I had a small cup to warm up. I found a tin cup on the shelf and poured myself about 2 inches. The wine was sweet, but had a strange aftertaste, earthy and a bit metallic. Not great, but it warmed me from the inside. I sipped slowly while listening to the wind howl outside. The combination of the warm cabin, the crackling fire, and the wine made my eyelids heavy. I decided to rest just for a bit, then try to figure out how to get back to my camp. That's the last thing I clearly remember before everything went to hell. I woke up in total darkness, not the partial darkness of night, but complete, absolute blackness. I was lying on what felt like a wooden bench, not the chair I'd been sitting in. The fire was out. The cabin was freezing. My head pounded and my mouth felt like sandpaper. How long had I been out? "Hello?" My voice sounded strange in the darkness. No response. I fumbled in my pocket for my phone to use as a light. Gone. Same with my flashlight. I patted around the bench and floor nearby but couldn't find them. Panic started to rise in my chest. I stood up slowly, disoriented in the pitch black, and shuffled forward with my hands outstretched until I found what I thought was the stove. I remembered seeing matches on the shelf. Carefully feeling my way along the wall, I eventually found them. My hands were shaking as I struck one. The small flame illuminated the face of an old man standing directly in front of me. I jerked back, dropping the match, plunging us back into darkness. My heart nearly exploded. Had he been standing there the whole time, watching me in the dark? I struck another match, holding it higher. The old man stood motionless, maybe 3 feet away. He wore faded overalls and a flannel shirt. His white hair was wild and unkempt, his beard long and matted. But his eyes, Jesus Christ, his eyes. There weren't any, just empty, dark sockets where eyes should be. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The match burned down to my fingers, and I dropped it with a yelp. In the darkness, I heard him inhale deeply, like he was smelling me. "You drank," he whispered, his voice like dry leaves. "You weren't supposed to drink." I bolted. I didn't know where the door was, just crashed into furniture, knocking things over as I frantically felt along the walls. Behind me, I heard slow, shuffling footsteps. My hand finally found the door handle. I yanked it open and tumbled out into the storm. The snow was knee-deep now, the wind a solid wall of cold. I didn't care. I ran blindly into the forest, away from the cabin, away from that thing. I couldn't see more than a few feet ahead. Tree branches whipped at my face, roots and buried logs tried to trip me. Behind me, I heard the old man's voice calling out, "Peacock! Peacock!" At least that's what it sounded like. The word made no sense, but he screamed it over and over, his voice somehow carrying over the wind. I kept running until my lungs burned, until I couldn't feel my feet anymore. I don't know how long I ran. Hours, maybe. The storm raged on, and I was hopelessly lost, stumbling through the darkness. Eventually my legs gave out, and I collapsed against a tree, gasping for breath. The temperature had dropped even further. I knew I couldn't survive much longer in the open. That's when I spotted it, a dark opening in a rocky hillside about 50 yards away. A cave or an overhang, I couldn't tell exactly, but it was shelter. I forced myself up and staggered toward it. It was a small cave, barely big enough for me to crawl into, but it blocked the wind, and that was all that mattered. I huddled inside, shivering violently, trying to warm my hands under my armpits. I needed to make a fire somehow or I'd freeze to death. I checked my pockets for anything useful and felt something in my jacket that hadn't been there before. A small box. I pulled it out. Matches, not mine. I hadn't brought matches like these. They were old-fashioned wooden ones with red tips. I needed to see how far the cave extended, if there was enough room to build a small fire. I struck a match. The flame illuminated the narrow space around me. That's when I saw it, about 10 feet deeper in the cave. At first I thought it was some kind of mutated bear, but as it dragged itself toward me, I realized it was something else entirely. Something human-shaped, but wrong. It moved on all fours, but its limbs bent at impossible angles. Its skin was pale gray and seemed to be covered in holes, dozens of them, all over its body, and in those holes were eyes, human eyes, different colors, different sizes, all blinking independently, all focused on me. I screamed, scrambling backward, but there was nowhere to go. The thing kept coming, making a wet clicking sound. As it got closer, I saw its face, or what should have been a face. It was just more holes filled with blinking eyes, some of them empty, oozing a thick black fluid. One arm shot out, impossibly fast, grabbing my ankle. Its grip was like iron. It pulled me closer as its other hand reached for my face, fingers stretching toward my eyes. "Give," it hissed, its voice bubbling through a mouth I couldn't see. "Give I." I struck another match, desperately waving it at the creature. It flinched away from the flame with a shriek. That's when I understood. It hated the light. I frantically struck more matches, 3 at once, holding them toward the thing. It retreated deeper into the cave, those countless eyes blinking rapidly, some closing entirely. I had maybe 20 matches left. I needed to get out, but the storm was still raging outside. The thing was blocking my way deeper into the cave, which might have led to another exit. I was trapped. I decided to follow it. If I stayed by the entrance, I'd either freeze or the matches would run out and it would return. Maybe there was another way out deeper in the cave. It was insane, but it was my only chance. I lit another match and moved forward. The cave narrowed before opening into a larger chamber. The creature was nowhere to be seen, but there were 3 tunnels leading off in different directions. I could hear scuttling sounds echoing from all of them. I chose the rightmost tunnel, staying close to the wall, striking a new match whenever the previous one burned down. The passage twisted and turned, sometimes so narrow I had to squeeze through sideways. All the while, I heard that clicking sound, sometimes ahead, sometimes behind me. The matches were running low. I had maybe 5 left when the tunnel opened into another chamber, this one larger than the first. The walls were wrong. They seemed to pulse slightly, like something breathing, and they were covered in more of those holes, though these were empty. A voice whispered from the darkness beyond my match's light, "The peacock welcomes you." Another voice joined it, then another, all saying the same thing. I spun around looking for the sources but saw nothing. "Who are you? What do you want?" I shouted. "Eyes," came the reply from multiple directions. "The peacock needs eyes to see." That's when I understood what the old man had been shouting. Not peacock like the bird, but the peacock, this thing's name. I struck another match, frantically searching for a way out. In the flickering light, I saw movement all around the chamber, more of those creatures emerging from holes in the walls. Some had many eyes, others just a few. All were coming toward me. Only 3 matches left. I broke into a run, choosing a tunnel at random. Behind me I heard them following, that horrible wet clicking sound growing louder. The tunnel sloped downward, taking me deeper underground. I slipped on the wet stone, tumbling forward, somehow keeping my grip on the matches. When I picked myself up, I couldn't hear them anymore. Had I lost them? I struck my second-to-last match and found myself in a small chamber with a pool of water. The water glowed faintly with a blue light of its own. Reflected in it, I could see dozens of eyes staring back at me. Not my reflection, but eyes floating just below the surface. I backed away, moving toward the only other tunnel leading out of the chamber. As my match burned out, I heard splashing. Something was emerging from the pool. My last match. I stuck it in my pocket for now, feeling my way along the tunnel in total darkness. The passage began to slope upward, giving me hope. Maybe it led to the surface. I don't know how long I crawled through that darkness. Hours, maybe. My knees and hands were raw from the rough stone. Occasionally, I would hear clicking somewhere behind me, and I'd push myself to move faster. Finally, I felt a change in the air, fresher, colder. I struck my last match and saw a faint light ahead. An exit! The storm had passed, and moonlight was filtering into the tunnel. I crawled faster, hope surging through me. 20 feet from the exit, my match went out. I didn't care. I could see the opening now, a jagged hole leading out into the night. Something grabbed my ankle. I kicked wildly, connecting with something soft that made a squelching sound. I scrambled forward on my hands and knees, the grip on my ankle tightening, pulling me back. "Give eye," the voice bubbled behind me, closer now. Just one eye. I reached the exit, lunging for it, but the thing yanked me backward. I rolled onto my back and saw it looming over me, the peacock, its face now just inches from mine. One hand pinned my chest while the other moved toward my face, a finger extending like a probe toward my right eye. I had nothing left, no matches, no weapons. Just as its finger touched my eyelid, a beam of bright light cut through the darkness. "Who's there?" a human voice called out. The creature shrieked, releasing me instantly and skittering back into the darkness of the tunnel. I lunged toward the exit, toward the light. An old hunter stood there, flashlight in one hand, rifle in the other. He helped me to my feet, his face shocked at my condition. "Jesus Christ, son, what happened to you?" I couldn't speak, just pointed frantically back at the cave. He swept his flashlight beam inside, but there was nothing to see, just an empty tunnel. "Peacock," I finally managed to say. The peacock. The old hunter's face went pale. He grabbed my arm and pulled me away from the cave entrance. We need to go, now. He practically dragged me through the forest to his truck, parked on a logging road about half a mile away. Once inside, he locked the doors and started driving fast, checking the rearview mirror constantly. "You saw it?" he finally asked, his voice tight. "The thing with the eyes?" I nodded, shivering uncontrollably. "Local legend," he said. "Most think it's bullshit. Couple hunters go missing up here every decade. Bodies never found. Few who made it back talked about a thing in the caves. Called it the peacock on account of all them eyes." He didn't ask for details, and I didn't offer any. He drove me to the nearest hospital in Munising, where they treated me for hypothermia and exposure. I told the doctors I got lost in the storm. They didn't question it. Happens to hunters all the time. My truck and gear are still out there. I'm never going back for them. I took a bus back to Chicago the next day. That was almost 2 weeks ago. I haven't slept more than an hour at a stretch since then. Every time I close my eyes, I see that thing reaching for me. Sometimes I wake up feeling like someone's watching me in the dark. Sometimes I think I hear that wet clicking sound coming from my closet or from under my bed. And sometimes, just as I'm falling asleep, I swear I feel something touch my eyelid, and a voice whispers, "Just one eye, just one."